I'll stop there.
Calling of the roll.
Okay. Regent Bartel?
Here.
Regent Bradley?
Here.
Regent Burmaster?
Here.
Regent Conley Kiesler?
Here.
Regent Crane?
Here.
Regent Keen?
Here.
Regent Davis?
Here.
Regent Falvo?
Here.
Regent Lofton? Regent McPike? Regent Pruitt?
Here.
Regent Rosenzweig?
Here.
Regent Salas? Regent Seminis?
Here.
Regent Shields? Regent Smith?
Here.
Regent Spector?
Here.
Regent Walsh?
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. The minutes of the April 12th and 13th, 2007 meetings have been distributed. Are there any corrections or additions? Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed. In your folders is a resolution honoring Chancellor Martha Saunders for her leadership at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. As you know, she is leaving shortly to become president of the University of Southern Mississippi. She is unable to be with us today, so we cannot present the resolution in person, but we will be sending it to her after the meeting. Is there a motion on the resolution?
Second.
I'll let the record show that it is approved by acclamation unless there's an objection. Report of the April 20, 2007 meeting of the Educational Communications Board. The written report has been provided. Are there any questions or comments?
Stephen, I just have one comment I promised the board I would bring to this board, and they have great concern about not being able to run the reruns of the Badger games. And I know that was all contract issues, but I would mention that they felt it was a bad move on the part of us to not be able to allow that to happen. So there's my statement on it.
Is that a decision of our contract with Learfield, or is that a Big Ten
I think it's a Big Ten decision.
Well, then there's nothing we can do
There's
about it.
nothing we can really do about it, but I know that they had many discussions about it, trying to get to allow that to happen, but it's just not going to happen. So
Why don't we have an explanation, a written explanation provided to us, and we send it back to the board?
that'd be great.
Okay. The report of the May 9th, 2007 meeting of the Hospital Authority Board has been provided. Are there any questions or comments? The board's representatives are Regents McPike, Rosenzweig, and Smith. Now, a quick report from the President. Two things are happening that are significant right now. First of all, the governor is traveling the state today, or yesterday, and the previous days in support of the covenant. And the covenant is really very much part of our vision, the growth agenda, and it's one of the legs of our stool, and so to speak, it is an important commitment that we've made. And there are issues regarding questions being raised about the budget, but the real fact and the important thing for us to remember is that we have made this commitment. We have signed on, and we're all working towards it. And it's the acceptance throughout the state is terrific. It's very important. Part of Governor Doyle's vision, and it is something that we need to continue to support. And there will be all sorts of steps along the way, and we should be proud and happy that we were part of that, and not only recommending it, but putting some substance to the program. The second thing that is obvious is that Joint Finance is reviewing our budget, and there's going to be lots of turns and good news, bad news in the next month and a half or so, and then within 2 to 3 months, we're going to need to make another decision on tuition that will be more reflective of the joint finance decisions and what comes out of the legislature, as well as what we do with the faculty pay plan. And so we all should keep attuned to that and be be aware that those are issues that we need to continually think about, because we're going to have some tough decisions at either our August or July meeting, and that decision hasn't been made, which meeting that will be, and that will be dependent upon the budget. Since I've only got a couple meetings left, I've been going through a lot of my files. I can't believe the files I've accumulated in the last 4 years as an officer. But I ran across some things that I thought are kind of important about what's going on at the state level and the things that we have to be concerned about. But I want to quote some words to you from John Weaver in 1972, and it kind of puts this in perspective, because this isn't the first time this issue's come up. John Weaver said to the public in 1972, quote, "Our unwavering confidence has been that public university education is a public good, and that public investment in such endeavors is repaid to society manyfold and in countless ways. The people of Wisconsin have had great faith in public higher education. Above everything, I would covet the hope that through the difficult days of decision that lay immediately ahead, the citizens of Wisconsin will sustain that faith." And that was a statement he made as the Joint Finance and as the legislature moved forward. Now, on a more personal level, I was going through some other files, and I came across an employment contract that was signed in 1933, and it was to my father as the head boxing coach. And I read this just the other day, and I couldn't help but think of the parts of it that are still applicable today. And let me just read you some things and put this in perspective. Your salary is fixed at $600. However, and this was 1933, you should be aware that all university salaries are subject to a reduction of 12% below $500 and 25% above $10,000. That was a voluntary reduction taken in 1933. So once again, the faculty was paying a price. Now, since my father was also attending law school, and that was the only reason he came, they thought he wanted to coach. He was quite surprised to find out they were going to treat him as an out-of-state student because they weren't too certain of how he would do as a coach. Now, the contract for employment further stated, quote, "Now as to expenses, the big item here is tuition fees. These have been increased. All non-residents of Wisconsin will pay $100 a semester." Now, Tom Loftus would appreciate this, because they said, in addition to the general incidental fees charged all students of $17. Now, that means that the segregated fees back in those days were about 30% of the in-state tuition. In other words, the total for a non-resident law student is $284 a year, and that means after subtracting that figure from your compensation, you will have living expenses of $240, which, quote, "is not a large sum, but enough to cover your room and board." Now, to show you that the seeds of the covenant were planted so in 1933, they also told them, quote, "I do not know how much you would feel about doing a little outside work, which you could probably get to piece the above, but more than 50% of Wisconsin men students do earn all or part of their expenses by outside work." I found it curious that they didn't say women students, but they said men. But the point is that even back then, with a tuition of less than $100 a year, people were expected to work. And so in a sense, if you push it forward, things haven't changed a lot since 1933, except we pay coaches a lot more, I noticed. Not the faculty.
And boxing.
And that's the end of my report. Oh, the president of the system.
Thank you, President Walsh. President Walsh neglected to mention that as boxing coach at the university, his father had a backup appointment as professor of the sweet science, which he would go to at 80% of his salary of $600 should he have to retreat to that appointment. But let me, before I begin my report, skip to the next generation of Walshes. We have a special guest with us today, David's daughter, Molly Walsh, over in the corner. Stand up, Molly. Her father said to tell you that she's doing some scheduling work in Governor Doyle's office, which is why we can get in to see him now. But Molly's been dispensed by the Walsh family to see if her father really adds anything of value to this Regent enterprise. So she'll be reporting back to the family based on his performance today, and she'll let me know too. So I'll report back to you at the June meeting. I wanted to start my report this morning by turning over the floor to my colleague John Wiley. He's been among those monitoring most closely federal negotiations that could mean changes in the way colleges and universities are accredited in this country. You may know that the U.S. Department of Education has been pushing for some new rules about accrediting agencies, which is causing some strong concern on the part of higher education. The issue is that these changes could give the federal government unprecedented control over academics at colleges and universities, academic decisions that we believe are properly now entrusted to faculties and chancellors and presidents and governing boards. 6 of the higher education associations in Washington have signed a statement of concern about these potential changes. They've not taken a position against any new regulations or against any proposals that would seek to measure educational outcomes, not taken a position against any of that. They do, however, want to make sure that the rules are driven by colleges and universities and their local governance, not by political appointees in Washington. John currently serves as the chair of the Council on Higher Education Accreditation, or CHIA, which is not, by the way, those little animals that have hair that go out of them that look like plants. It's the National Association of Accrediting Bodies. Being chair of that is surely one of the most thankless jobs in higher education, but John's doing it nonetheless. I wanted him to bring you up to speed this morning on some of those changes as they're proposed currently and what, if they were passed in their current form, they could mean for UW campuses and higher education national. John. And I think you have some information John gave you in your packets on this topic.
As Kevin said, it's probably the most boring subject in all of higher education. Just one slight correction, Kevin. CHIA is a member organization, and the members are us. All of the institutions of higher education, public and private. Pretty much anyone who seeks accreditation is well advised to belong to CHIA. And CHIA, in turn, then tries to sort the credible accreditors from the phony ones. The purpose of CHIA is to recognize accreditors and, in effect, to accredit the accreditors. So that's what we do. In addition to some other activities, there's a very strong activity at CHIA monitoring and flagging and warning the public about literally fraudulent universities, of which there are a very large and growing number. So we maintain a big database of universities that simply aren't what they say they are, and try to work with states. We've notified all governors, all departments of education, schools operating in their states that we believe are literally consumer frauds. Kevin summarized it accurately. What's going on right now, just in a nutshell, is an attempt by the Department of Education, led very much by Secretary Spellings herself, to federalize higher education. In effect, she wants to bring to higher education all of the marvelous benefits and wonderful reforms of the No Child Left Behind Act. It's done such a great job of improving and fixing everything that's wrong with K-12 education that now it's our turn. She appointed, as I'm sure you widely publicized, a commission termed the Spellings Commission. I'm going to be as candid as possible here. A very packed membership, packed with people whose you agree with, to examine their education and report on the The recommendations they came out with were exactly the recommendations she wanted and expected to get in the first place. Some of the evidence that they used as a recommendations were things such as an assertion that only 31% of U.S. college graduates are functionally literate in English. If you find that a little hard to believe, that was one of their facts that these regulations or these recommendations were based on. As soon as she got the recommendations, and by the way, a token representation of higher education was on the commission. David Ward, my predecessor, currently the president of the American Council on Education, was a member. He was the lone dissenter. He voted not to approve the recommendations and took an incredible amount of grief for that in Washington. No sooner did she get their recommendations than she convened a process known as negotiated rulemaking. Now, the word negotiation has a special meaning in Washington. Here are the ground rules that the negotiated rulemakers, and again, this was a packed body. There were very few representatives of what you would think of as higher education. The schools that were represented were by and large schools you've never heard of, and so on. But here are the ground rules. We want you to consider these proposed rules that we're giving you and discuss them, and this will be a consensus process. What consensus means is if you all agree on one of our rules, then your agreement will be advisory to the Secretary, and the Secretary will do as she wants. There will be no dissent allowed. If anyone around the table disagrees, we will declare that there was no consensus reached, and the Secretary will do as she wants. So that's the negotiation we've been going through. 3 meetings were scheduled. Judith Eaton, the president of CHIA, was one of the negotiators, and she was the lone dissent on some of those recommendations. By the way, the negotiators were told not only must you agree on each recommendation, if you don't agree on all recommendations, no consensus was reached. So a single dissent on a single rule would void the whole process, and the Secretary would do what she wants. Among the rules are recommendations, for example, that the Department of Education set the rules on transfer credit. So we would no longer be able to decide whether or not an applicant to one of our schools has done academically credible work that should enable them to get out of repeating it at our school. The department has been under tremendous pressure, especially from the for-profit sector, and I'm sure you know, in your regions of the state, there are things called universities that sweep in periodically and set up shop in a motel and offer a weekend course for 3 semester credits or something. Absurd amounts of credit for ridiculously small amounts of work. We will be told under these rules that we must accept that as credit in preparation for taking our courses. We're told, and another of the rules says that all universities and colleges, and this applies to all of us, private, public, cosmetology schools, Harvard University, that we have to set bright line standards as determined by external agencies on student learning outcomes. That's Department of Education code for testing, standardized testing. Olivia, I'm sure, is very familiar with the standardized testing No Child Left Behind has imposed on the K-12 schools. We would get the same thing. This is a colossal windfall for the testing industry, which has been very heavily lobbying all of this. So that's what we're facing. Now, as a result of Kevin told you that 6 presidential associations all wrote their members. I showed you the email that all members of NASALGIC got from NASALGIC. I can assure you I got a similar letter from AAU and a similar letter from ACE, a similar letter from CHIA. It isn't just the 6. All the accreditors are also alerting the schools that they accredit that these rules are, in effect, a federalization of higher education. We're moving toward imposing a Soviet system of higher education on the country that has, up until now, had the model system for the whole rest of the world. There's no specific action needed at this moment, but we thought you should be aware of what's going on. As a result of the controversy, the Department of Education did decide to schedule one more session of negotiated rulemaking that will occur in early June. There's no reason to believe there will be any different outcome. But sometime in June, they will publish in the Federal Register the proposed new rules for public comment. And that's the time when all of us have to get engaged. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you have about the process.
Yes, Chancellor, I wondered, did David Ward write a dissenting opinion, that you know of?
He explained his vote publicly. He didn't. There was no opportunity to write opinions as such and put them on the record.
Is he written any of the?
Oh yes, and ACE publicized, his organization publicized his vote and his reasons for voting that way at the time.
That would be interesting for us. I just would like to see it, happen to have it.
I'll be happy to get what I can from David and forward it to you.
Great.
His comment would have been on the Spellings Commission. Now, he has also spoken out on the proposed rules. I'll get you what I can of his writings on this subject.
Regent Davis.
The three aspects of the question I want to ask for something that we can't normally get from you, which is candor. It's supposed to be funny, everybody's supposed to laugh. I'm just wondering, are there potentially some legal issues with respect to the authority to do this? And wait, there's two other pieces. Is this being fast-tracked by the Department of Education, in your opinion? And thirdly, who has more political clout around this issue, in your opinion? You see there's a kind of general theme in this.
Those are absolutely dead center of the target, those questions. There are legal issues. For example, there is nothing in the Higher Education Act that mentions transfer. Therefore, in the opinions of the attorneys of all of our associations, the Department of Education has no authority from Congress to rule in any way on transfer of credit. They dispute that. But that is a legal issue that may have to be decided by Congress or in the courts. Are they fast-tracking it? Faster than lightning. I mean, it's unbelievable how fast she's bulldozed this. And I'll let you decide for what reasons. And let's see, what was your third?
It's kind of who has more political clout.
Yeah, well, Congress in the end can stop this in its tracks. So we'll see.
Regent Pruitt.
Chancellor, just a couple, just for sort of to follow up on Regent Davis's question. The driving forces of this, as I understand it, are sort of for-profit universities, standardized tests, companies. I'm surprised Halliburton isn't involved in some of this.
Don't cut them out.
I guess I'm questioning in terms of the university, the education community. Are those? I mean, is there a sector of the education community, the higher education community, beyond for-profit universities that are sort of at the table, or that you feel like? I mean, is this reflective of some sort of ongoing national debate that's been going on in higher education, along the lines of there was some of that in the No Child Left Behind process? I'm just curious.
Yeah, there is. Higher education we have a very diverse, far-flung system of higher education. We have a huge number of private schools, a smaller number of larger public schools. The Carnegie Foundation tries to classify them, and it's a very imperfect classification system, but there are something like 27 different categories of colleges and universities that they recognize. The missions are different. There are open access schools that almost necessarily have and always will have very, very low graduation rates. There are schools that are intended to be primarily remedial. There are highly selective private elite universities that charge no tuition whatsoever. They're fully endowed. It runs a huge range, and the missions of these schools are different. The mission of a music conservatory is not to give a broad liberal arts education. It's to train a performer. And you can decide whether you want to go there or not. If you go there, you don't get a liberal education. You just learn how to play the violin better. It treats all of these as if they were one and the same. And it tars or paints all of us with a brush that's dipped in the worst offenses. So are there things going on in higher education that are reprehensible? Absolutely. Are there areas in which K-12 education isn't performing up to public expectations? Absolutely. If you just focus on those and then say, okay, how can I stop this? Well, I can stop it with a sledgehammer from Washington. And that's what they're trying to do. I think all of your schools, the UWC schools, are paying a lot of attention to accountability measures and continuous improvement of various sorts. So are all of our peer schools around the country. There, as I said in the beginning, there are also fraudulent schools. Let me give you a concrete example. There's a legitimate Jesuit school called Regents University that has existed for many years and does a fine job. All of a sudden, a few years ago, a St. Regis University appeared on the web, and it was intentionally designed to be confused with the real Regis University. They got a lot of students to enroll. They got federally subsidized student loans. They paid their tuition. There was no school. It was just internet fraud. It was run by the Russian mafia. It was accredited in Liberia by an accreditor set up by a couple out of a motel in Washington State by bribing the Liberian officials. I mean, and that's one example of dozens of this sort out there. And so you can find all kinds of fraud. People are angry about being ripped off by higher education. And if we're all treated as one and the same, if we're homogenized the way the Department of Education is trying to do, we do no one any good.
Regent Green.
John, can you tell us what kind of attention Congress is giving this now?
Not much. They're a bit preoccupied with other things right now. They haven't even passed reauthorization of the Higher Education Act. They've been putting that off and putting it off and delaying it.
But there is awareness.
There is awareness. Yeah. We've talked to key people in both the Senate and the House about what's going on. They're aware of it, and they're poised to do something about it at the right time.
Regent Pavel.
I have two questions. Is there any factors that in the higher education groups that are supporting this?
Not that I've been able to identify. I haven't talked to anyone among our peer schools, among the accreditors. The regional accreditors, like ours, the North Central Association, in my opinion, have been pretty cowardly in this process. They are very much afraid of offending the Department of Education. There's a conflict of interest there. Just as we're often afraid of offending the accreditors. If we do something they don't like, they may withhold accreditation. If the accreditors do something the Department of Education doesn't like, they worry that they may lose their recognition and have to go out of business. But they have not been very bold. Behind closed doors, they'll say this is awful, but in the meetings, they sit silent and appear to be consenting in the negotiated rulemaking process.
And the other question, in your paper, it says they plan to hold a series of regional summits. Is there anything we can do to help you?
Well, not at this moment. I just wanted, or Kevin and I thought you should be aware of what's going on. This is frankly the biggest issue. I've spent more time on this in the last several weeks than on anything having to do with my campus. It's a huge issue nationally for all of higher education and a huge threat.
Regent Bartel.
John, did the Spelling Commission make any recommendations that you would regard as positive? Question number one. Question number two, what recommendations did they make with respect to federal student aid?
Didn't have much to say about federal student aid, except that is the hook that gets them into a control mode. They provide a lot of student financial aid, and therefore they think they have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure it's spent well. And I don't think anybody could argue with that. The recommendation, each of the recommendations applied to the right schools would make sense. Applied to all schools is nonsense. Are there some schools from which graduates are functionally illiterate? Probably. None of them in this room. and yet we'll all be subject to the same rules. They are very hung up on standardized testing. They believe that we need to prove convincingly that students actually learned something for the tuition they paid. It's not enough to say a student came to me fresh out of high school and graduated with a degree in physics and understands statistical mechanics. We have to prove it. How do we prove it? Well, we buy a standardized test. We give it to the freshmen, we give it to the seniors, and see if there's a difference. And the standardized tests are on general knowledge, not on specific major topics.
Any other questions?
Well, I think we just wanted to alert you to this big issue, and we'll be monitoring the developments, and at some point we may want to come back to you and have you weigh in as a board at the appropriate moment with Congress, with the Department of Education on this. So this was kind of an introduction to the subject for you, and I have no doubt that we'll need to come back to you at some point. One anecdote on some of the abuses, the scams along the lines of the one John mentioned with St. Regis. I got a little involved when I was running one of the offices for the New York Regents earlier in my career with an FBI sting operation that was called Dip Scam. This was about 20 years ago, and it was set up to shut down diploma mills that were operating in various states. And there was a fellow, I think from Louisiana, who was running a company called Diploma Replacement Services, Inc., and his marketing was, lost your Harvard MBA diploma, send me $50, send me $50 and I'll send you a replacement. So he got caught up in Dip Scam and got sentenced and was serving time in a federal penitentiary. And after a couple months, the guards started to notice diplomas from some of our finest higher education institutions appearing on the walls of some of his cellmates in that part of the block. So he was successfully still conducting the business in prison education now once he was incarcerated.
There is one thing you could do immediately. I don't remember who is our representative to the AGB. The AGB is right there in Washington. They're very much aware of this process, but it wouldn't hurt if the Wisconsin Regents just sent a letter, an expression of concern to the AGB, saying we hope you're on top of this.
Right.
Well, if you're all willing, we can draft something up and work with Eileen, who is the rep, and have her send it off.
Can I have a motion? I want to put it on the record.
So moved.
We have a motion that we send an appropriate communications. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Very good. Thank you. I'm happy to report to you the results of some very outstanding work at the state capitol last month. To put it mildly, April 18th was a very busy day for UW down there. First, Chancellors Betts and Wells joined me to testify before the Joint Finance Committee about the important UW capital projects slated for funding in the biennial budget, and Regent Salas mentioned this yesterday. We told the committee that quality facilities where students live and learn are important to make sure that students have a good educational experience. These building projects are very important if we're going to be able to attract students and achieve the goals in our growth agenda. And many of these projects, as you know, have been on the drawing boards for quite some time. We also reminded the committee that these projects have support from students and alumni and donors, and we made clear that this board forwarded only the most vital projects for their consideration. UW Eau Claire Student Senate President Ray French joined us to answer questions about the Eau Claire Davies Center project, and I was very proud of him. He withstood some fairly withering fire from some members of the committee on that project. UW Stevens Point Chancellor Linda Bunnell also testified, as did other students, staff, and alumni. A student from UW Madison got to join me in part of my testimony regarding the Madison Student Union project. Legislators and a number of regents joined us at the heart of the Capitol later that day to celebrate Posters in the Rotunda, the showcase of undergraduate research in the UW system. Both of the legislative houses passed a resolution commending the UW system and proclaiming Undergraduate Research Day. It was also Spirit Day that day, which encouraged students and alumni to travel to Madison to talk with their legislators about the importance of support for the UW system, and they did. More than 400 students, alumni, and other reps from around the state participated in these events. The posters featured 65 student researchers, as well as remarks by yours truly, by Lieutenant Governor Barbara Lawton, Senator Kathleen Vineout, Representatives Jeff Smith and John Murtha, and UW Eau Claire student researcher Lori Scardino. This is really a wonderful event, and the students who are there and their faculty mentors who come with them are just so enthusiastic about the research projects that they're involved in. It's a very heartening day. I think it also, of course, is a real demonstration of the value of Wisconsin's public higher ed system and research on UW campuses, research that our undergraduates are working with faculty and staff on. And I'm pleased that a number of legislators made it to the Rotunda to talk with the students, to talk with the faculty about these projects. And I think you have a commemorative copy of the posters in the Rotunda program in your folders. At least I hope you do. Students and alumni also visited legislators' offices while they were at the Capitol. That's part of the point. And a number of them, and some of you joined us for a reception that night, a legislative reception, where we hosted UW-Madison football coach Brett Bielema. He was nice enough to come and talk to the legislators and the rest of us. Bucky Badger was there. Our UW Eau Claire Jazz Ensemble also played. I should also mention that the legislature passed other resolutions that week honoring the accomplishments of the UW-Madison's men's track and field team, its women's hockey team, men's and women's basketball teams, and the UW Green Bay women's basketball team. Also that day, the UW system was represented at a joint audit committee hearing about economic development by UW Extension Vice Chancellor and Provost Marv Van Kekerex and by an outreach program manager in Extension, John Fisher. They testified about the UW system's ongoing efforts to create a directory of university economic development resources, a small but important part of the audit on economic development that was conducted a number of months ago by LAB. Their testimony was very well received by the Legislative Audit Committee. And finally, the next day, the Senate Committee on Agriculture and Higher Education invited me for a conversation about the growth agenda for Wisconsin and why it's important to Wisconsin families and the state's future. Regent Walsh joined us to talk about our efforts to be responsive and accountable to legislators and the Wisconsin taxpayers, and Chancellor Betts made the trip to describe UW River Falls growth agenda initiatives that will boost retention and graduation rates of freshmen and transfer students. So we had a very positive reception at that committee, I think, and lots of good questions about various aspects of the growth agenda. So I want to thank everybody from all the institutions, the Regents, system administration, who made that week, I think, a very strong showing for us at the state capitol. On a related note, I continue to meet with state legislators, as many of our chancellors do, and I'm beginning to include them in the discussion about the UW strategic planning, the same strategic planning effort that we talked about yesterday morning. Joint Finance Committee co-chair Kitty Rhodes and I had a good meeting about that last week. I'll continue to seek her input as well as feedback from other key legislators as we move forward with our ideas. Since the last board meeting, I've also visited with Representative Steve Noss, and Regent Bradley joined me for conversations with Senator John Lehman and Kathleen Vineout. Mark, I think you've met with some other legislators as you've made the rounds, too. And I have plans next week to meet with, or shortly to meet with Pedro Colon, Representative Colon, and Senator Mark Miller, two other members of Joint Finance. So we'll keep you posted about how those visits are going. UW campuses in the Chippewa and St. Croix valleys gathered at UW Stout last week to step up their collective commitment to improving Wisconsin's economy. UW Eau Claire, UW River Falls, and UW Stout, with Chippewa Valley Tech College, have all signed what they've called an educational partnership for regional development. Under the agreement, these institutions will collaborate on curricula that meet the region's workforce, education, and training needs, enhance opportunities for credit transfer, and look for more new ways to develop the regional workforce. These kinds of collaborations can send a strong message to business and government leaders that the UW is a major driver of the state's economy, and as this partnership shows, we're ready to do more. So thanks and congratulations to Chancellors Betts and Levin Stankiewicz and Sorensen and Chippewa Valley Tech College President Bill Eilenfeld for making this commitment. Finally, I want to mark what is truly the most special time of the year in the UW system. And in the coming weeks, as you know, students and families all around the state will hold some well-deserved celebrations, and we can celebrate too. We expect that this year the UW system will have graduated more than 31,000 students by the time commencement season is done. These graduates are among the UW's greatest contributions to the state. Thanks to our faculty, staff, and university leadership, these students now have the tools they need to be critical thinkers and informed citizens and accomplished professionals in a wide variety of fields. If history holds true, more than 80% of the Wisconsin students who will graduate this year will stay in Wisconsin to live and work. Graduates from across the system will hear from inspirational speakers at ceremonies in the next couple of weeks. They'll hear words of wisdom from national and state leaders and alumni, not to mention some of our own chancellors and regents. Some of our campuses are also granting honorary degrees to people who have made truly outstanding contributions in Wisconsin and elsewhere. And just let me remind you of one of those situations. UW-Oshkosh is receiving some deserved national attention for its plan to offer honorary doctorates to the nation's first female astronaut candidates. They're known as the Mercury 13. These female pilots secretly trained in the 1960s to become astronauts, but largely because of gender bias at the time, were never allowed to fly. Today, these pioneers are in their 60s and 70s and 80s, and UW-Oshkosh is the first to honor them as a group for their efforts. This recognition has been reported widely by USA Today and the Washington Post and CNN, among others, as well as media in Western Europe, in Russia, and in South Africa. It's truly a good news story, and UW-Oshkosh, Chancellor Wells, and all his colleagues have done well in sharing it far and wide. Rick was telling me yesterday that he got a call, I think the day before, that there was a movie company that was making a movie on the Mercury 13 astronauts before Oshkosh decided to grant them the degrees, and they've now decided to send a crew to Oshkosh to film the honorary degree ceremony as part of the movie they're making about the women astronauts. So congratulations to Oshkosh for doing that. I know Rick and Lane, I don't think Lane's here either. I think they're all up dealing with some of the ceremonies involved in that today. So I hope the Mercury 13 astronauts do not have the same reaction to their Oshkosh honorary degrees that Mark Twain had to his. He said this in his autobiography: "It pleased me beyond measure when Yale made me a Master of Arts, because I didn't know anything about art. I had another convulsion of pleasure when Yale made me a Doctor of Literature, because I was not competent to doctor anybody's literature but my own, and couldn't even keep my own in a healthy condition without my wife's help. I rejoiced again when Missouri University made me a Doctor of Laws, because it was all clear profit, I not knowing anything about laws except how to evade them and not get caught." So, to all with us today, as you talk with new graduates over the next few weeks, I hope you will encourage them to become advocates for the University of Wisconsin and to stay connected closely with us. This year's graduates are really fine examples of what the who, the what, and the why of our growth agenda for Wisconsin is all about. So I know each of you join me in offering this year's graduates our most sincere and hearty congratulations and best wishes for all of their futures. Mr. President, that concludes my report.
Thank you. The next item is always a lot of fun, and we look forward to it. It's the presentation of the 2007 Regents Academic Staff Excellence Awards. And I would call on Regent Conley Kiesler to start the presentation. She's the chair of the Academic Staff Excellence Award.
Thank you. And I would encourage any of the regents who haven't been on one of these committees that are picking awardees to get on it. It is the best. It's why we sit around this table. It's to see the work that's being done for our students, and it's definitely more fun than reading audits, I've decided. Not that I'm just in the audit thing, because, you know, I am the queen, but it is a little more exciting. It is with great pleasure that I welcome today the two winners of the 2007 Academic Staff Award for Excellence. We recognize the dedicated work, the vital services, and outstanding contributions of the UW System's academic staff. Each recipient will receive a $5,000 stipend designated to support their professional development or other activities that will enhance a university program or function. Each university system institution was invited to submit one nomination, and I chaired the committee along with Regent Davis, McPike, Salas, and Smith. There are 4 areas that we look at when we're evaluating these applications: excellence of performance, personal interaction, initiative and creativity, outstanding achievement. And I think you can all understand what they are, so I'm not going to read the definitions of each one of those for you. I know that I speak for the Regents on the committee in saying that we were impressed by the quality and achievements of all the nominees. And it was hard to choose just 2 winners, and I have to tell you, because I want this on the record, we did get the system to agree to 3 winners next year, because it is so difficult to narrow this down to 2. But we really believe that all nominees represent the enormous accomplishments and the commitment of our academic staff across the UW system. And all the nominees should take pride in having been nominated for this award. Their nominations acknowledge the value their institution placed on their many contributions to the University of Wisconsin system. So with no further ado, I'm going to tell you about our first awardee winner. Tammy Salem Stevens is a senior director at UW-Platteville Women in Engineering Program and Engineering Advisory Office. Tammy has consistently excelled at her work since her employment began in 1997. Some notable accomplishments are, over the past 10 years, she has initiated and implemented over 20 different initiative programs for Women in Engineering Program and Engineering Advisory Office. She's created a database to track statistics of women in the College of Engineering, Mathematics, and Science. She is considered the chief advisor in the college, and both faculty and students regularly call her for advice. She served on the university advisory team and contributes regularly to the mission and the committee. The retention program that she leads provides support in many different ways, from assisting students with major choice in engineering, mathematics, and science, to helping students successfully transition to different majors on campus, to provide advice and training to colleagues, in addition to developing and maintaining the only Women in Engineering program in the state of Wisconsin. She has been instrumental in the positive effect of how the campus community has embraced the idea of support and perspective in current women in students in engineering, mathematics, and science. Personal interaction is the key to being a successful engineering advisor. As a chief advisor in EMS, which is Engineering, Mathematics, and Science, you're going to hear me say that, at her office door is always open. She values face-to-face interaction and will often walk to a colleague's office to have a discussion rather than return a phone call or an email. Her motto is to be available for colleagues and students, and she creates that welcoming environment in her office. Service on the university committees also helped her to establish personal interaction among students and colleagues. The most effective characteristics of an advisor are to show genuine concern, empathy, assist students in finding options, and provide hope that any concern can be resolved. Tammy has had the opportunity to be creative and develop new initiatives based on her expertise and her knowledge. Here are some of the examples. Women in Engineering Scholarships, Women in Engineering, Math, and Science Advisory Board, I'm going to call this WEP, but WEP stands for Women Engineering Programs. So it's the WEP Career Days, the WEP Web Page, the WEP Mentoring Program, the WEP Student Ambassadors, the Women in Engineering, Math, and Science Phone-a-thon, Engineering, a Girl Tool, and many more. She has participated in writing 31 grants, of which she's received 28 for over $293,000. Tammy has demonstrated, yeah, there's more, believe it or not. Tammy has demonstrated outstanding achievements by the following areas. Served on the University of Wisconsin-Platteville Engineering, Math, and Science Alumni Chapter for 10 years and was elected president in 2005. Served on the Women in Science Advisory Board and is a member of the National Academic Advisory Association and the Women in Engineering and Programs Advocate Network. Monitored and advised the Society of Women Engineers section of the UW-Platteville Outstanding Students Organization in 2005. Was invited to serve in the Wisconsin Equal Prosperity Regional Convener. Tammy has created a national reputation of excellent programs that encourage girls to consider science and technology, engineering, and math, and did submit, we didn't know this when we wrote this, but she had submitted the UWP Women in Engineering Program for a National Women Engineering Program and Advocate Network Award and has received that award. So that was very exciting. And I just want to end this introduction with her personal philosophy. Investment in individuals are more valuable than any other type of investment. When a student or a peer asks for support, My goal is to have that individual leave my office with ideas and hope that their personal situation can be overcome. This is one of the most rewarding aspects of my job. Let me introduce you. Tammy Solomon.
Wow, that's a lot of stuff I didn't realize.
It's a lot of stuff to say, too.
I'm a little overwhelmed. Thank you, Eileen, for such a wonderful introduction. And as I listened to you, I nodded because I really do feel that those are my personal philosophies, and I live and follow them every day. So thank you for sharing them. I'd like to also thank Chancellor Marquis and Provost Butts, who are sitting over there, for the opportunity to work on the UW-Platteville campus. It is a great campus to be on, and I'm very proud to be employed there. I'd also like to recognize my husband, who's sitting here today, for his love and support. And often I get students who ask me advice about how do you do work-life balance as a mom and a wife and a professional. And what I tell them is, and if their goal is, if they're getting married or want to get married, I tell them, hands down, what you need to do is find the right partner. And I found the right partner. Thank you, Doug. I have been reflecting on what have been the key points in my life that have led to today's award. And I've concluded that first, and really I'm not brown-nosing here, this is really important to me. I truly believe that one of the key starting points for me was attending one of the UW system universities for both my undergraduate and graduate degrees in engineering. I grew up in southwest Wisconsin, and if you can believe it, in a town of about 600 people. There were about 30 people in my graduating senior class, and I was a first-generation college student. I remember beginning to save money for college since age 6, and like most other students, worked through high school and college to finance my education. What a tremendous resource for all young people in our state to attend one of our state schools. Without this wonderful educational system, college may have been unaffordable for me. The other two universities in my top 3 choices were private and outside of the state of Wisconsin. However, the other two universities could not compare to UW-Platteville when it came to affordability and quality. I am so very proud to say that I have graduated from a top-notch undergraduate engineering college. I think that too often the UW system educational resources are taken for granted, and I can guarantee you, not by me. I have also been fortunate to have had a few great mentors and support from various people. However, as you can imagine, I've run into a few people who've not been as supportive. My first job from college was very challenging. I was a female in a primarily male industry, and I was working in a supervisory capacity. I was young and had a college education. Most of the management employees were not college educated and had worked their way up to management positions. In addition, many of the people I supervised could have easily been my parent or grandparent. Partway through my employment, the company hired an engineering consultant, and I was chosen to work directly with him. I was so lucky to have a mentor who had been working as an engineer for over 30 years. He helped me to work through some very, very difficult work situations where I was undermined, harassed, and demeaned, all while helping me maintain my self-esteem and confidence. In the end, I asked Mick, that was his name, how could I thank him for his support, and his answer was simple: do the same for others as I have done for you. From that point on, and because of the value I placed in Mick's support, I knew that a focus in my life would be on similar investments in people. My job at UW-Platteville has given me that opportunity. College education, and I truly believe this, is such a critical time of growth for any individual, and I feel very privileged to work with all of our college students. Our students, more so now than ever, need tutors, counselors, mentors, advisors, and other professionals to assist them with the transition from high school to college, and yes, eventually the workplace. At times, the value these types of professionals bring to the education of a student is not viewed as critical to a student's education. I very much applaud the Board of Regents for recognizing that professionals outside of the classroom do bring significant value to our students' education. Chancellor Markey, Provost Butts, my supervisor Dean Schultz, and my colleagues will all tell you that I am very passionate about advocacy and support for our students. It is my wish that each of you are either inspired or more inspired to think about what you can do to ensure that our students know that you are all their advocates. The advocacy, advising, and mentoring meant the world to me, and I know that it is important to our students today. Thank you.
Regent Smith.
It's my pleasure to present our second award winner, the 2007 Academic Staff Regents Award for Excellence, and that's Ron Buchholz. Ron is the Director of Career Services and Leadership Development at UW-Whitewater. Ron has given nearly 23 years of his life providing superior service to the UW-Whitewater community. Among his many accomplishments are, he's a two-time recipient of the Academic Staff Excellence Award at UW-Whitewater for non-teaching academic staff. That was in 1994 and again in 2006. He's also a two-time recipient of the Academic Staff Recognition Award, 2001-2005. He was also a recipient of the Campus Outreach Opportunity League, cool, Leader of Leaders Award, recognizing outstanding advising of a community service student organization. He was nominated for this award by UW-Whitewater students and was presented the award at the Cool National Convention in Boston in 2000. In addition to that, Ron is involved in multiple committees, task forces, and is viewed as a true collaborator helping to bridge the gaps between faculty, staff, and students. He's a flexible individual who is always trying to change his own direction to accommodate the needs of others. Some examples of this: he gives approximately 50 presentations annually to student groups on a variety of topics. He was trained in 1997 to facilitate the National Coalition Building Institute's Prejudice Reduction Workshop. He's facilitated this workshop for students nearly 30 times since then. He was trained in 1995 to facilitate a team adventure, also called low ropes courses. He utilizes team adventure facilitation annually with a number of student groups to enhance trust and communication within their organization. Finally, he was trained, a lot of training here, in 1993 to administer and interpret the Myers-Briggs type indicator. Many of us are familiar with that. He uses the MBTI annually with various student groups to enhance the understanding of personality differences within organizations and to teach student leaders to be more effective leaders within those organizations. And in 1997, he developed a leadership education seminar based on the 5 fundamental principles of effective leadership. To date, near over 1,000 students have completed that seminar. If that's not enough, he's developed a number of initiatives to foster student participation in community service in the Whitewater region. These include creation of a student group whose sole role was to plan and implement community-based service projects to promote student volunteers. Did that from 1993 to 2003. Development of a web-based clearinghouse of community service opportunities, posting volunteer opportunities within the community-based agencies in the Tri-County area. He's co-authored a UW System Institute on Race and Ethnicity grant to provide seed money to sponsor an alternative spring break trip for UW-Whitewater students to engage in community service with the Cherokee Nation. And in 2002, he collaborated with the Whitewater Unified School District to co-author a grant to the Ronald McDonald House Charities of Southeastern Wisconsin to establish an after-school program for children in need at local elementary school. The after-school program provided numerous opportunities for UW-Whitewater students in volunteering during the 2-year duration of the grant. It's clear from what I've presented to you that Ron is one of the most respected leaders on our campus. He's respected at the campus, state, regional, and national level as a resourceful colleague and dedicated professional who embraces change and whose tireless efforts support student success. Finally, he has served 2 or 3 more things. He has simultaneously served as the Director of Career Services and Leadership Development at Whitewater after the Director of Career Services until the position was eliminated as a result of the budget cuts in 2005. He was charged with providing the leadership to merge both departments into one Student Affairs Department by January of 2008. From 2004 to 2006, he served as the chairperson for the Service and Engagement Subcommittee, responsible to assess and report on how UW-Whitewater serves and engages the community. And he served as director of the newly formed Office for Leadership Development in July of 2001. He assumed the leadership in bringing together student activities, student involvement, leadership education, multicultural education center, women's center, and adult resource center functions under one student affairs department. His actions, as you've heard, embody 2 of the themes that have been selected under his leadership and that are part of his personal philosophy. First, to choose to make a difference, and clearly Ron has. And 2, building on a legacy of success. It's a pleasure for me to introduce our second winner, the 2007 Academic Staff Regents Awards for Excellence, Ron.
I was feeling pretty good about myself until I heard Tammy's. I think I was second. I'm impressed. I'm very honored to receive this award and very humbled. As was stated before, there's lots of fantastic academic staff in the UW system that do great work every single day. Thank you, Regent Smith. Thank you, the selection committee. Thank you, all Regents, President Riley. This award means a great deal to me. I'm still a little surreal because why would you pick me? But none of us do it for the awards. We do it because there's passion in our hearts and how we serve students. I want to share with you, I've been in the system for 27 years. I worked 4 years at UW-Waukesha and 23 at Whitewater. And this came, I kind of feel like I'm 35, maybe 40. And a few times a day when I look in the mirror, I'm always kind of shocked. And I think it's my older brother. It's like, what's he doing here? It's me. And I remember last August we had a wonderful program that we developed. We call it U-Lead. And we identified students who indicated on their ACT that they were very interested in participating in student government in college. So we invited them early to campus 3 days ahead of time, new freshmen, and put them through an intense leadership activity that included really meeting with people, members of faculty, senate, academic staff, assembly, university administration, city of Whitewater municipal leaders, and really put them through an intense time that they also bonded, and it was successful beyond our wildest imagination. I just want to indicate one person who was instrumental with that, Jan Bilgan, the Associate Director of Leadership Development. Jan, if you could stand. Jan was fantastic in that program. But what was concerning for me is that we had a graduation ceremony the night before move-in for 35 students, and there's probably about 150, 160 people there total. Parents came, siblings, and it was really a wonderful experience. But at the end of it, I was mingling, meeting some of the parents, and one of the moms came up to me and said, "My daughter absolutely loves you. You remind her just of her grandfather." So I was hoping, I was kind of expecting her to say father, and in my wildest dreams I was hoping to hear she say older brother, but I didn't expect grandfather. So I said, "Oh, that's really wonderful. I'm very honored." I lied. Sometimes a good academic staff member has to lie. So that was humbling for me again too. The 2 points I'd like to make in terms of why. What's really influenced me in terms of how I work with students. I think the first is my parents. And to my surprise, I looked before and my mother's here. She's 86 now, but really sneaky yet. No. So what happened, they didn't have the opportunities when they were young, growing up in the Depression, to really have a college education. But what I heard growing up is you're going to go to a UW school, you're going to get an education. There was an expectation to do that. You're going to make a better life than we were able to do. And it was really an expectation for a step up. And the open access to the system was tremendous for me, as Tammy was saying. I wouldn't have been here today, wouldn't be here today without that. I know what it's like to be a first-generation college student. I know what it's like to lose confidence at times and not have confidence and not feel like I belong. And so what helps me is able to really kind of see that in our students. And I can see myself, even though I'm grandfatherly, I can see myself in a lot of our students. And that really helps me connect. Because even though that was fall of '73 when I went to UW-Stevens Point for my undergraduate degree, it was really something that I can still feel to this day working with students. It's probably been my driving force and my passion. Whenever I get more administrative and less connected with students, I feel like I lose my magnetic north. So to really be able to work with students and see that on a daily basis is just wonderful, and it provides me that passion. The second part, I have to tell you, and there's a lot of things out there. I think certainly working with good supervisors, certainly working with great colleagues, with great students, the infrastructure that's provided through the UW system in the state of Wisconsin in terms of facilities and the systems and all the things that happen that way, none of us could be successful with all that. But probably the single most important developmental piece for me was my first job after my master's degree was working at UW Waukesha County. And if you know our center, folks, wear lots of hats. So many hats that you really get a broad perspective of the student experience. And so while I was at Waukesha County, my title was Coordinator of Career Counseling and Student Activities, but I was in charge of most of the high school visits and doing admission work. I did about a third of the academic advising, and I did the academic appeals process, and I advised student government and advised the activities board and planned spring carnival and big events like that, and I advised SUFAC and a number of other things. And so it gave me a totally broad perspective of what our work is about. And I wanted to focus, and I felt like I was certainly a jack of all trades, master of none, and went to Whitewater in '84 to focus, and that felt good. But I wanted to bring that broad perspective. I didn't feel comfortable in a silo, and so sometimes it's a shame when I talk to my colleagues that are so connected through their professional associations to other people in Res Life or other people in career services. They're more connected to other people elsewhere than they are to just other people in different disciplines down the hall. And to get to know somebody who's a sociologist or a biologist or somebody else in a different department, doesn't matter what the administrative setting is or whatever, but to get to know people on campus is critical, and to break down those silos and to look at the student experience holistically is really something that I've tried to do because of that experience in the center campus, that initial experience. It stuck with me for these years, and I just refused to be put in a silo. And so I think that probably happens is why I was asked to assume a career service leadership position about 2 years ago, because I don't like being in one silo, and it's kind of fun to be able to move back and forth. So with that said, and those are the two most important factors for me in terms of who I am today. Just in closing, I'd like to again thank you for this honor. This is truly something that hasn't even hit me yet, to be honest. And I just appreciate the time to talk with you and to meet you, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was wonderful. Next item is the report of the Physical Planning and Funding Committee. Regents Jesus Salas.
Yes, Mr. President. Thank you very much. First of all, I want to begin by saying that the committee is greatly indebted to you for allowing us finally to go up to the 19th floor.
Don't get too comfortable.
Well, even on the rotation, it wouldn't be bad. It'd certainly be an improvement over what we had before. And just to give you an idea of the generosity and how the fellow regents responded to that, I had to restrain them and remind them that there is a process in naming because they wanted to recognize you by naming plazas, monuments. I mean, bronze statues that are by the camper handle would pale in terms of some of the proposals that we heard yesterday, including changing the name of a campus. Can you imagine the Walsh University of Wisconsin? But finally settled down after I think it must have been that blinding light, and return and convene the Physical Planning and Funding Committee, President Walsh. I wish, besides your daughter opening up our meeting, that your mother would have been here today, your last meeting here in Madison. At a football game, you had invited her, and I had suggested meeting her at that time that she sit by me instead of over there at the head of the table. So with that in mind and in that spirit, I'm going to make my report here today. Mr. President, there are 3 items that we're going to be looking at today. What I'm going to do is, because of the changes that were made in one of the items, I'm going to remove it from the consent agenda and ask for your consideration separately. We will only be dealing with the West Campus Utility Improvement Project and the Washburn Observatory Renovation Project on the consent agenda, and then I'm separating the UW College's request separately, if you please. The following resolutions, Mr. President, were unanimously approved by the Physical Planning and Funding Committee and now are presented as consent agenda items. Resolution 13C, brought by the UW-Madison, requesting approval of the design report and authority to construct the West Campus Utility Improvement Project. This project will construct utility system improvements to distribute additional capacity to the west side of the campus. And if I may just add a little note here. When we initially approved, and in your original documents you have the dates where these projects are come before us and then are enumerated, come before the State Building Commission and then to the Joint Finance Committee. This particular project was reduced in the total amount of money that we had requested authorization. And, you know, the real nonsense of reducing utility projects. I mean, what kind of savings can you make to respond to the Joint Finance Committee? So you'll notice in the history of this particular project that we took money that had been intended for the renovation of Sterling Hall and made up the amount of money that was required actually to complete the project. And if you notice, there are some revisions in the numbers. The numbers are correct, but it incorporates that amount of money that we transfer from other projects in order to complete this most necessary project. Resolution 13D, requesting authority to seek a waiver for a single prime contractor bid, approval of the design report, and authority to construct the entirely gift-funded Washburn Observatory renovation project is the second item. These 2 resolutions were passed unanimously by the committee, and I now move adoption of Resolution 13C and D, Mr. President.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Is there a request to remove either item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda passes.
I will continue, Mr. President. Resolution 13B is brought by the UW Colleges on behalf of the UW-Waukesha campus, requesting approval to amend a land lease with Waukesha County to grant an easement for the construction of a water tower by the city of Waukesha Water Utility. And this request was held over to revise the resolution to include a reference to a temporary construction easement. That revision was made to the resolution, and that is the reason it was removed from the consent agenda, because it wasn't included in your initial information. I now move adoption of Resolution 13B, Mr. President.
As amended?
As amended. Second.
We have motion and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. President, Assistant Vice President David Miller reported that the Building Commission approved about $37 million for projects at their April meeting. The funding breakdown for these projects is $25 million general fund supported borrowing and $12 million program revenue funds. Additionally, we have two short presentations, one by Planning and Systems Specialist Tom Bidner, presented information about the all-agency project program and how it is specifically targeted towards maintenance and repair projects. And I mentioned this when I commended you and President Riley in your support before the Joint Finance Committee in discussing our fiscal facility needs. They included this very important portion of the total budget, which is used for maintenance and repair. Recent increases to the all-agency funding were intended to decrease the maintenance backlog. However, funding availability remains at less than half of the demonstrated need, and program limits both scope and budget for each project. And we should remember that even though we're getting a slight increase from the previous biennia, that we're still only have access to funds that will meet half of our needs, Mr. President. In order to make progress on our maintenance need, the program either needs to be redefined or a new capital project track needs to be identified and implemented. And thus, the second portion of the presentation, that is Ms. Sullivan, the Director of Facility Planning, presented information about changes in the UW system physical planning process. The changes are intended to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of several ongoing planning initiatives to better comply with statutes and to facilitate working relationships between campus, UW system, and DOA's Division of State Facilities. While numerous improvements are being developed, yesterday we heard about integrated strategic planning, campus master planning, biennial planning, and pre-planning of projects. And I interject at this time that the buddy system that was created for a number of reasons, or that is for us to get an idea of more closely of what are the academic activities at the respective campus, is a very important part of the role of a regent. And those of us who have been sitting in the Physical Planning Committee really appreciate getting a hands-on and a broad view of the planning process of these campuses. And we hope that that continues. I know that my two campuses, or that is River Falls, which I just visited last week, and Eau Claire, which I plan to visit again next week. I am going there with the campus physical needs in mind, in addition to other academic needs. So I hope that we all can continue to use these in addition to the Regents meetings. Not only did we meet earlier at Parkside, but later this spring in Oshkosh, and we'll be visiting River Falls this fall. I think these meetings are very, very important for all aspects of the campus, but for us who are in physical planning, they really give us an idea of just what are the physical needs. And when we talk about some of these deferred maintenance needs that they have, you really get an a bird's eye view of just what they are. So we're looking forward. Chancellor Betts, thank you for your hospitality last week. We're looking forward to visiting you as Regents as a whole this next fall. The committee adjourned to closed session to discuss the naming of the facility, not the naming that was proposed originally on your behalf for allowing us up into the 19th floor. President Walsh, this is the naming of the Stevens Point building. The meeting was adjourned and the committee toured the Washburn Observatory with the project architects and program staff. The tour demonstrated the historic preservation aspects and programs enhancement of the renovation of the project. And Mr. President, this concludes the report.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions to the chairman? I mean to the Yeah, you're the chairman. My legacy is you.
That's not a bad
Any
legacy.
questions? No, it isn't. And I promise you I'm continuing to negotiate with Mr. Bradley about your next location.
Yes, please.
He seems to think the garage is fine.
Well, I don't know how finance ended up on the 14th floor. There must be a room down there.
Yeah, suddenly there's a room for that.
Right, and
Yeah.
here we are on the 15th floor, but this is my 5th year, and now I understand that there's another room on the 14th floor, so we need to explore that.
Yes.
And it has windows.
Yes. We're working on it. Next, I call on Regent Davis for her report.
It's a wonderful day to be in Regent. I found, and I know we all agree, that the two awardees from Whitewater and Platteville remind us of what we're doing this for, and we are so honored to have this privilege to serve the University of Wisconsin system. I'm truly honored by that opportunity when I think about the two awardees that we were introduced to. So I just feel really good about that. Mr. President, I am pleased to report the summary from yesterday's meeting of the Education Committee. Let me review in brief the four agenda items on which the committee took action. And I'd like to then share with you some of the most salient points of the discussion in which the committee productively engaged yesterday. First, we had 2 program authorizations. We first heard the presentation of the Bachelor of Applied Studies in Interdisciplinary Studies at UW-Green Bay. As you'll recall, this was the second Bachelor of Applied Studies degree program presented for approval in 2 months. We similarly approved the BAS degree at UW-Oshkosh at our meeting last month. Like the Oshkosh program, this BAS, you don't mind me saying BAS, get a whole thing, was also developed through COBE funds provided in the 2005-07 biennial budget. The Green Bay program takes a 30-year-old major in interdisciplinary studies and reconfigures it as a Bachelor of Applied Studies designed expressly for those who hold an applied associate degree from WTCS or in any other regionally accredited university. The program will accept as a block all 60 of the credits earned through the student's applied associate degree. Students will then earn an additional 60 credits toward a baccalaureate degree. Green Bay engaged in a rigorous analysis and discussion of whether these transfer students would be academically prepared and concluded that they would indeed. In fact, we were informed that Northeast Wisconsin Technical College is already the largest provider of transfer students to UW Green Bay, and that these students tend to perform at rates equal to or better than non-transfer students. In the past, many of these students would subsequently transfer to another private institution because not enough of their associate degree credits would be accepted. In fact, we saw a videotape of a gentleman who said that of his 99 credits, only 9 were going to transfer, and that's why he was so excited to be looking forward to this degree so that he can indeed get 2, did he say 2? Or more years of his life back. Yeah. I think this was a direct quote. We were told that this program was in high demand and that applications were waiting and would be processed as soon as Monday. The second program before us was the Doctor of Physical Therapy at UW-Madison, otherwise known as DPT, or the Tom Loftus Memorial.
Memorial,
That will be known in the future. DPT will replace Madison's Master of Physical Therapy, otherwise known as MPT, program, changing from a 2-year to a 3-year program. The change is motivated by the need to meet the advancing professional standards for preparation of physical therapists. Some of you, or us, will recall that we had a rush of these allied health programs under Regent Olivieri's tenure as education chair, and that he voiced, as others, voiced a lot of concern about the changing degree requirements of many of these programs and the burden these changes would place on students in terms of time and tuition costs. But as we were told time and time again, the train has already left the station and our institutions needed to accept these changing requirements and meet them head on to be competitive. Physical therapy is indeed a changing discipline, with an expanded scope of practice in which patients have direct access to physical therapists without needing to be referred by a physician, especially in rural areas. Nationally, there is a growing need for practicing physical therapists who are now required by their accrediting agency to have a clinical doctorate. Physical therapy is one of the fastest growing occupations in Wisconsin, with a 46% projected growth in need from 2000 to the year 2012, because, as Regent Crane so candidly put it yesterday, people like her and the rest of us, baby boomers, need physical therapy services. We asked the Madison presenters for elaboration on their collaboration plans with the UW System's other DPT group program, which is the consortial DPT offered by UW La Crosse and UW Milwaukee, and we approved in 2005. We were assured that collaboration is already taking place in many ways, in a variety of ways, and more to come. And the committee asked to receive an update on both DPT programs in 2 years, with an emphasis on letting us know how that collaboration actually is working. It was clear to us that this is a hot degree, and the institutions offering it are turning people away despite the increased time and cost to degrees. So the demand is clearly there, and this will enable us to meet that demand in greater ways. We also learned that new doctors of physical therapy will earn more than their family physicians with MD degrees. We then moved on and heard an excellent presentation by UW Parkside's interim provost, Jerry Greenfield, on faculty research and creative activity at UW Parkside. This presentation had originally been on the agenda for the March meeting at Parkside, but we just plumb ran out of time. So the downside of deferring the presentation until this month is, ironically, that no Parkside faculty were able to attend and be a part of it because they were in the middle of giving final exams. So despite the absence of the faculty, Provost Greenfield conveyed admirably and passionately the extent to which Parkside, in addition to its strong focus on teaching undergraduate students, has a faculty dedicated to conducting research and creative activity. He showcased several wonderful examples, including the work of communications professor Jonathan Shaler, who has been producing full-length Shakespearean plays with prison inmates since 2004. In fact, he made the point that research and creative activity are critical to good and innovative teaching, and that the very content of courses is renewed by faculty throughout their scholarly and creative work. I want to take this opportunity to again thank Provost Greenfield for his presentation and to express our regret that his faculty colleagues were unable to join us, for we were indeed impressed with their work. The committee then took 2 additional actions, first on the bequest from the Vilas Trust, and then on revised faculty personnel rules from UW Green Bay. At the April meeting, we formally approved the 2007-08 request to the Vilas Trust. Yesterday, we formally accepted the proffer returned to us, which totaled over $14.8 million. For those of you who read your Regent materials carefully, I'm sure every one of us did, you'll note that this amount came in at $24,508 less than we asked for. This slightly lower figure was a result of the Trust's available income and will be absorbed by UW-Madison's from its one-time only program allocations. We were assured that Madison would work carefully to reallocate fairly the Vilas funds if received, and we once again express our deep appreciation for the generosity of the Vilas Trust. In terms of the UW Green Bay revised faculty personnel rules, we approve them. We then moved to a report of interim Senior Vice President Rebecca Martin, which generated several interesting discussions. And as she pointed out, this has been an agenda item for each of the 4 months she's been in the interim role, and this was the first time she was able to present, given the other things that were on our agenda. So she was excited, and we were excited. First she provided an encouraging update on our transfer relationship with WTCS, and in particular on the Chippewa Valley Collegiate Transfer Program we approved in February. The committee received assurance that some of the concerns that were raised during the approval of CVTC program would not, in fact, be problems. For example, UW System and the WTCS staff met with the Department of Education personnel and were told that WTCS transfer students would be just as eligible for financial aid as other students. I think that's even in writing. In addition, staff from both systems met with the Higher Learning Commission and received strong assurance that the proposed program would not need trouble in seeking accreditation, so we will proceed accordingly. The program is on track so that students will be able to enroll in the degree program by fall as planned and promised. Moreover, Rebecca Martin has met with her WTCS counterpart, Kathy Cullen, to develop and formalize a series of proactive steps designed to facilitate more streamlined transfer and better collaboration between the two systems for the future. Some examples of these steps include a mutual understanding that the two systems are working together to improve access to higher education for Wisconsin citizens, monitoring the development and implementation of the CBTC degree, early and ongoing discussion of program proposals across the two systems with the goal of encouraging potential partnerships and identifying problems and roadblocks earlier in the process, regular status reports to both systems governing boards, and seeking to raise potential issues and possible resolutions well in advance of board consideration. Symbolically, Rebecca will be attending the WTCS board meeting next week. Rebecca noted that there would be challenges along the way, and that the UW system would endeavor to involve UW institutions in discussions wherever appropriate, as well as ensure fidelity to our institutional missions. I think I speak for all members of the committee when I say how enthusiastically we met these steps, and I want to thank Rebecca personally and her staff for their diligence in advancing this collaboration, as well as that of the WTCS staff. Second, Rebecca gave us a preview of the Plan 2008 Progress Report the full board will hear in June. Let me say right now something that we all know to be true. The progress made by the Plan 2008 is mixed at best. The retention and graduation numbers we saw in this year's accountability report presented to us last month were not what any of us were hoping for. The gaps in both retention and graduation between students of color and their white counterparts or peers are increasing. Last month's report on the equity scorecard showed the attention some of our campuses are paying to the reasons underlying these gaps. And the report next month will identify other exemplary programs from our institutions. Nonetheless, the committee had a broad-ranging discussion focusing on the complicated set of factors contributing to the bad numbers. We also discussed the need to change how courses that students repeatedly fail are taught, which speaks to the need for professional development and the financial resources that will enable our faculty to engage in the kind of dramatic curricular overhaul that will affect real change, as was described going on at UW Parkside. Chancellor Keating noted how labor-intensive it is to engage in genuine course redesign, but that Parkside has been doing just that thanks to some generous one-time funding it received from our system. He also reiterated something that we've heard before. The retention numbers that are reported in the accountability report do not tell the true story. The institutional graduation rates at UW Parkside, for example, do not include students who transfer in from other institutions, even if they graduate from Parkside. This is true for all of our institutions. Regent Loftus noted that the Fiscal Bureau reports these lower rates to the legislature, and that is all the data legislators see. And now we'll see what they see, thanks to Regent Loftus. We do not have the opportunity for a more nuanced explanation of why the rates are so low and what the data means. Associate Vice President Sharon Wilhelm told us that about the efforts by our campuses to use the numbers from the National Student Clearinghouse, which provides more accurate student degree and enrollment verification. In other words, for example, being able to track where students are graduating from who may have entered any one of our institutions but graduated from other institutions outside our institutions, for example, Alverno College or whatever. This clearinghouse apparently can provide information that will allow us to basically tell the true story about graduation rates, if you will. The UW system, however, is prohibited from using this clearinghouse numbers, but our institutions for a fee could. The discussion was really good preparation for next month's report, both in terms of guiding our expectations and of beginning to think strategically about what comes after 2008. I know I have some ideas, as do many of my Regent colleagues. And next month we'll have the opportunity to begin addressing them. Third, with the help of Don Mash and Sharon Wilhelm, we heard an update on the Wisconsin Covenant Program. Don Mash described a national program called Know How to Go, developed by the American Council on Education, the Lumina Foundation, and the Ad Council, which helps young people and their families think early about preparation for post-secondary education. UW system staff will be working with them to develop marketing materials for Wisconsin to bring this Know How to Go home to Wisconsin. The UW system will also be working in conjunction with WTCS, the private colleges and universities, and the DPI on how best to reach out to Wisconsin families. Sharon Wilhelm informed us that there is a newly created Office of the Covenant with an energetic and already productive director appointed by the governor. The UW system is also putting together a Covenant working group with campus participation. Chancellor Keating, who's really busy and engaged with us, really engaged with us yesterday, reported on the governor's Wisconsin Covenant Day in Milwaukee yesterday. He said it was well attended and that the governor was very clear in setting parameters around the program that would help students and families determine eligibility. Here again, we had an interesting discussion focused on some of the reasons behind the political and taxpayer resistance we've encountered to what we all agree is an inspiring program. Regent Spector lamented the extent to which higher education is thought of as a private good that should be paid for by the individuals to whom the benefits accrue. While we all acknowledge that funding issues remain, we remain confident that we can work those out just as other states have, like Indiana. We also agree that Wisconsin's economic future depends on bringing more Wisconsin kids into higher education. As a society, we can't afford not to pay for this. Finally, Rebecca gave us a preview of the discussion we will hold next month in committee on charter schools. The guiding question will be one asked by Chancellor Santiago last fall. Should UW-Milwaukee be in the business of chartering schools? And while the discussion will be philosophical in its framework, I've asked that we guide the discussion with whatever data is available regarding the student performance at the 11 charter schools this board has approved. Regent Spector further asked that we receive in writing information on how Bob Catman works with the charter schools under our authority, and as well as how faculty are involved with and or benefit from UW-Milwaukee's chartering of public schools. We have a lot to look forward to for the June meeting. So, with that then, I have 4 resolutions approved yesterday by the Education Committee that I now present as consent agenda items for your action. Resolution 11B, authorizing the implementation of the BAS in interdisciplinary studies at UW Green Bay. Resolution 11B2, authorizing the implementation of the Doctor of Physical Therapy at UW Madison. Resolution 11D, accepting the 2007-08 profit from the Vilas Trust, and Resolution 11D, approving the amendments to the UW Green Bay faculty personnel rules.
Is there a second? Second. Is there a request to move any item from the consent agenda? Regent Loftus.
11B, parent.
Regent Bertel.
11B1.
Any other requests? Now the consent agenda remains 11D1, 11D2. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 11B1. Discussion. Well, I better have a motion. I have a motion.
I'll move it.
We have a motion.
Second.
Second discussion on 11B1.
Mr. President, I only have a couple of questions to ask about. It's actually about 11B1 and B2. And I want to check a couple of assumptions that I'm making in regard to this and then ask a couple of questions. One of the assumptions is that the primary criterion for adding a program or degree is the extent of the demand for that program over time. Is that correct?
That is one, the need.
Is that the primary criterion? Would you say?
I don't know that I said primary, but it's big. It's a big one. It's one.
Okay. And the second assumption that I'm making is that there is some incremental cost involved in adding a new program authorization.
Not always. And you know what? I should have known. The time I didn't bring my materials is the time that you'll ask me a question. So I'm going to have to turn to Green Bay.
Yes, go ahead. Could we have a microphone?
I was asking you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The need for a program is one of the criteria, not the only one. In Northeast Wisconsin, for the Bachelor of Applied Studies degree, we did detailed market research early on in the stages of developing this degree. What we found is in Northeast Wisconsin, there are 62,000 people who have an associate degree. So there are many, many people who can benefit from this. We also did a survey of employers and found that in our region, a vast majority of employers said, A, that this degree is something they would support their employees pursuing, that B, it would enhance their career mobility within their companies, and that C, they would indeed contribute to the tuition reimbursement for this program.
Incremental cost.
Oh, incremental cost. That's another good one. This particular program will not involve incremental costs for the university in that it is supported by program revenue. We already have the interdisciplinary studies major, and we underwent a reorganization in 2003, which enabled that to be run entirely by program revenues. Does that answer your question?
Yes. The first answer I was a little puzzled by, because I think I was asking whether the student demand is the primary criterion, but I thought I heard you say is that if you offer it, they will come.
Number one, if we offer it, they will come, and number two, there is already student demand. Since articles have appeared in the newspaper saying that people were working on this kind of degree, our program has already been receiving applications. Now, there are no official applications for the degree because it doesn't exist yet, but they have been applying for admission into our Bachelor of our Interdisciplinary Studies major, and on the top of the application where it says Bachelor's of Arts, they've been marking that out and putting Bachelor's of Applied Studies.
No, that seems like student demand to me. Two questions. Thank you. Two questions. One is, when a new degree completion program is created, is there any consideration of eliminating at least one program? In other words, where there is no demand for it, is there an elimination?
Rebecca, you want to answer that?
Well, were you directing it to her?
He's asking a broader question.
All right. Can somebody answer the question?
And she's right there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There are no new resources that come along with the authorization from UW system to a campus when a new program is authorized. There used to be, but there haven't been for many years. So there are changes and shifts in our degree offerings at all of the institutions over time as disciplines emerge, new disciplines emerge, and the needs of the communities that we serve change. And so campuses are asked to reallocate resources, and this is part of the program authorization process. There's data, there's budget work that's done that's analyzed by our office working closely with the campus to ensure that the resources will be there to support any new program. So that's one of the elements that the Education Committee reviews as part of their recommendation. In some cases, we always have programs that are coming onto the agenda and programs that are being taken off of the list of program arrays at the various campuses, but it's usually not a one-for-one. I don't think that either of the institutions that we are considering today, programs from today, could point to a specific program and say we're letting go of this one in order to bring on another. But the resources behind them are definitely there and are taken from another part of the academic program.
Well, and the second one, isn't the doctor replacing the master's?
In that case, it is replacing
the second one.
The master's, but it's not a program in a different field.
You had two questions. We have a footnote here. Just a second. Go ahead.
Yeah, footnote to add to what Rebecca just said, Regent Bartelli. Every year, the Senior VP for Academic Affairs comes before this board with a program array report. We report on the number of programs that have been added, the number of programs that have been dropped in the course of that year. What we found over the last number of years, since I've been in the system anyway, is that it's pretty much a balance it's not one for one, as Rebecca said, but when you look at the numbers system-wide, we tend to close as many programs in a year as we add. And the other thing I'd add to that is that when we look at the numbers of programs we have for a system our size, we are relatively tight. That is, other systems tend to have a higher level of proliferation of programs than we do generally.
Well, that answered my second question.
Further discussion on 11B1. Regent Loftus?
Yes, the committee had several hours of discussion yesterday on this and the next item, and items that touched on President Riley's presentation yesterday about the future. But on this, one thing the Regents should realize that here we have a bachelor's degree that will recognize 60 credits from the technical college as the first 2 years of college. So those students going into this program will transfer 60 credits from technical school into this program. If they were to go into another program, those 60 credits, at least not all of them, would transfer. So for one program, we're saying these 2 years of technical school in a certain program count as 2 years of college, but the same credits do not count if you go into another program. And one of the things that came up at President Riley is that you assumed, but you didn't seem to focus much on your plan for the future as to what role these type of transfer programs from the technical school system were going to play in the future as far as producing more baccalaureate degrees. They did note at Green Day that the technical college is their #1 source of transfer students now. So it was a good discussion on this.
Regent Sells.
Yes, my question is general, and it follows on the question that Regent Bartel raised in regards to new programs that are added or programs that are dropped. And President Riley, you mentioned that you get a yearly report from the Office of Academic Affairs regarding the programs that are being proposed and the programs that are being dropped. If I recall, we entertain more discussion on programs that are added, in my opinion, that are programs that are dropped. That's true. When I raised the question of a particular program last year at Milwaukee, I was the only person that voted for opposing the elimination of a particular department because I was charged that was micromanagement. And without getting into the details of the merits of my discussion, I wonder what do you view or what other regions view as our role, not only in reviewing the status of new programs that are being proposed, but of concerns that we have about programs and departments that are being eliminated.
Couple thoughts, and then I'd like to hear what other regions think. The overall report on program array, where we come forward with the numbers of programs that have been added, the numbers dropped over the year, is not just a report to me, it's a report to the board, just to make sure, so you hear that every year. As I understand our region policies now on the matter you raised, Regent Salas, we come forward to the board for the board's approval with new degree programs, with new schools or colleges that are put together. We do not come forward if a new department is put together for board approval. We do not come forward if a department is eliminated. We do not come forward if a degree program is eliminated. And I guess my feeling on that is that's really appropriate. In a situation like a department being put together or a department being taken apart, I think it's best for the people in the discipline to decide whether a particular discipline is at a point where it deserves, needs, requires an administrative department around it or not, how that expertise should be distributed among faculty in that disciplinary area or interdisciplinary area. So I think given the kinds of implications that you always talk about as a board regarding new programs and program array in that regard, that's an appropriate board issue. I really don't believe it's appropriate for the board to get down into when a department's being eliminated or when a program is being dropped. I think that's a decision for faculty, deans, local campus administration. I think it would, in short, be micromanaging for a board at your level to try to get into approving each one of those kinds of moves. That's my opinion. Now others may not share it.
Regent, John McKeeson.
And I agree with you. I mean, I took a hard stand on that the chancellors need to tell us if there's a degree that needs to be dropped. We have to trust that you all know it needs to be dropped. You know, if there isn't a demand for it, if students aren't coming forward, I'm not going to know that. You have to tell me that. And if that's what you're telling me, then that's what we have to go with. I do see that as micromanaging. If we get into that type of layer of deciding what those universities offer and where they offer it. So even when you're bringing a degree, I have to trust that you've done the research, that the need is there, and that this is really important, and an education committee has seriously looked at it before they're bringing it before us.
Regent Simmons.
My quick question is, I agree with what Eileen said, but I also sort of agree with what Jesus says, because as public officials and with our email and UW system webpage, we get a lot of interesting and diverse emails about programs and particular situations, and how do we respond back to, say, a student who may be in a program, or to an alumni of a certain program that they're eliminating the philosophy major at a certain university, and this is where this person went through college and that degree's no longer there, and they wish to see it there, and they're a citizen of the state of Wisconsin. So I just wanted to know, even though I'm done soon, but how do we, but for my colleagues, how do we respond back when that's not within our jurisdiction?
Could I suggest an answer to that question for Regent Simmons?
Sure.
I think what I'd suggest, I think there's a distinction between being able to respond adequately to people who write you, which you should do, I agree, and we want to help you do that, and having to approve or disapprove everything that everybody sends you an email about.
We're going to go around the table because it's going to be a while, but
I actually wanted to come back, Mr. Chairman, to the point that I think Regent Loftus was making, and it is the point that the students, and this is the program that we actually would be voting on now. So I'm going to come back to the program from Green Bay and just want to say that for somebody like myself who sits on both boards, both the Technical College Board and the Board of Regents, the action that you're taking, I want to just say, is so positive, and the attitude of collaboration and understanding of where the students who are entering that program will be coming from and what an addition they are making to our state is just very, very heartening. And the Chairman Davis, you said at the beginning that sometimes it's just great to be a regent, and that made me feel really good, and I just wanted to share that with you today and applaud your positive action on that.
Regent Feldman?
Two things. One doesn't pertain to this, so I apologize, but it pertains to the conversation about ads and drops.
That's fine.
First of all, a comment. I don't know how we're any more or less micromanaging an ad. I don't know what it means. If a drop is micromanaging, why isn't an ad micromanaging? Secondly, on the question that I have, you mentioned that the Doctor of PT is replacing the Masters of PT. Does that mean everybody will be required in that program to have the Doctor of PT and the Masters is no longer being offered?
You got it.
Is that what I understood? Okay,
That's correct.
I didn't know that when we were approving the resolution.
The chancellor.
His question.
No.
Okay.
I want to get, you're going to, no, you can't. Because I'm starting to disagree with you, and I want to, I'm on Jesus' side. No, wait. We got a lot of people who want to talk, and we're going to do this in an orderly way. Anybody else over here?
I'll just comment briefly on the UWGB degree that just to remind us that this is was one of the suggestions of the report that the two systems put together over a 1.5 to 2 year process. So this is following through with that report, and it also is part of the mission of New Era, which we heard about last month in Oshkosh. So it falls directly in line with what we've been supporting all along. And as a UWGB alum, I'm so proud of this program because it really focuses on what UWGB has been about since the beginning of time, about interdisciplinary education, and there's a strong component of individual academic advising for each student, and also just being from Green Bay, knowing the need. There are, as we heard, thousands of students who have the potential to complete this degree. Currently, these students are going to private colleges that will accept all their degrees and have been for years. So we know the students need this, and they definitely will come. They would like to be a UW student, and now they'll have that opportunity. I think it's a fabulous program. Thank you.
I need to
You can speak again.
Can I? Thank you. I don't speak that often, so. But I need to respond to Chris, because when you take away something, a program that the alum has been in, or that there's this emotional response that I'm losing something. It's no different in a community when you close a middle school or elementary school. Oh my God, I went there, my kids went there, everybody's all upset about it. But it comes down to limited resources. And that's why we hire chancellors to tell us, you have limited resources, what do we do with those resources? So again, I put it back on them, and if we don't trust them, then they shouldn't be sitting in those seats, and we need to get people that we do trust in those seats. So I know that response. If we could afford everything, I say open the floodgates, let them all do it. But we can't. It's limited, and it's getting less and less. And so,
but I think Mike made a point.
Chris, hold it. You got other people who want to talk. Danae?
I think, first of all, I respect and appreciate the point that both Jesus and Mike Falvo have raised, but I guess I look at it differently. I think that we should, as a matter of policy, be very deliberative and vet very deeply and rigorously the additional programs and degrees. We need, and our criteria are clear. We look at need, we look at collaboration, we look at redundancy. I don't know what we call it, but there's something that says, do we need this? Who else is doing it? Whatever that category is. We look at diversity. We've got a number of very clearly delineated criteria that we review new programs. Policy, from a matter of policy, we may not be adding resources with each, but there's a potential of adding resources when you add a program or a degree. And I think from a matter of public policy, from the student's point of view, the public's point of view, they would want to know that the Regents are not making sure that we're not just, having, 15 MRIs, if you want to use a medical examples. I see a distinction between adding and deleting. In the deleting category, I agree with Eileen that that's what we hire the chancellors and the provosts, and I trust the process that they use. And we do have oversight by the UW systems folks in that regard. I think that there's also the opportunity on the rare occasion. One of the situations you raised when we first got here, Jesus, had to do with the Professor Jones's school.
Industrial relations.
Industrial relations.
And that one gave me real significant pause because I know of the history and the importance and what have you. And I wasn't really keen on, you're micromanaging, and so don't even talk about it. So I do think that there are those rare situations where people, the public, whether it's students or others, should feel that they can ask us are you sure about that? And in the end, we may come out saying, you know what, no, we trust that chancellor or whichever institution. But I think that should be an exception as opposed to the rule. I see those as two distinct, from a policy standpoint, roles for the Board of Regents.
Regent Burmeister.
Well, in response to this debate as to when we're micromanaging and when we're not, I'd just like to build on what Regent Davis said and maybe pose the question that is the distinction between an elimination of a program is the distinction, the question we have to ask on a board, on this board, is the elimination based on student demand, lack of student demand, or is it based on a policy decision? And I think that that's where it crosses the line with the industrial relations. We were feeling uneasy because it seemed like maybe there were some other things than just student demand and a research issue related to it.
Economics.
Okay, and so I guess I would like to pose that question, that may be the way we make these distinctions, that it's not always cut and dry, that it's just because it's an elimination of a program that it is micromanaging for us to question.
And President Watson, I'm not going to say any further, but I want to thank you and the rest of the boards for their comments on this. For me, it's not a theoretical exercise. I have something in mind that you might suspect, because at different times, for instance, I'll give you an example. At different times when we've come before you with women's studies programs, and academic affairs has given us comparisons of how we stand in relationship to our peers, and in particular the Big Ten. There's a dearth of programs in our system that relates to that. And for a period of time, there was a tremendous reaction from women's groups, Charlton State, on how we handle that issue. When we look at diversity issues, I happen to think that academic programs, as well as the hiring of a diverse faculty, create an excellent climate. And I might want to propose enhancing of existing programs. And I have, in particular, departments which are being eliminated, but I'll leave that to another time. But I want to thank the Regents, and I just want to say that it's not a theoretical exercise, and to me, it really goes to the heart of what we stand here. And I think definitely that's out for me. That's my own opinion. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, I have a comment, and then I wanted to ask a question back to the motion. But at least in my world, when people are accused of micromanaging, we're really saying to somebody, we don't want to go there. I think it's a poor expression. It's within our jurisdiction to ask these questions. We're a public policy body. We probably have some built-in presumptions that we don't want to overrule somebody who appears to have more expertise, so that if you get too narrow, you're starting to question the expertise. But I certainly thought the industrial management discussion was a very important discussion, because it was initiated by other factors than student demand. And I happen to think that we shouldn't be saying we're micromanaging. We should really say it what it is, and that is that maybe we don't know enough about it right now, and we ought to challenge ourselves to learn more. That said, I have a question.
David?
Yeah, Mike, are you there?
Yes, could I make a comment?
Yeah, let me just ask the question, and I'll leave it out there, and I'll be done in a second. Early on, Provost Hammersmith, you said that there's no incremental cost because there's program revenue. I'm a skeptic of program revenue. What does that, and being an accountant, I have a little trouble with this phrase program revenue, because if you're going to say there's no cost because there's program revenue, that means program revenue is gone.
The way that program works is it is run through outreach and adult access on a 104 fund, which I know all these different fund numbers are maybe not your favorite distinctions. The student's tuition pays directly for the instruction. So as the program grows, and that program has doubled in the last few years, the Division of Outreach is able to purchase more classes, so to speak, from the academic departments.
But that doesn't cover the facilities and...
Oh, no.
There's incremental cost.
Okay.
Okay. I guess, I see. All right. There is incremental cost.
The program revenue handles the incremental cost, not the fixed costs of having a university and student services and a library. But that's the way we are able to meet regional needs by programs like this without more GPR.
Okay. That answers my question, because I thought there was incremental cost. Mike, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a brief comment about Jesus's point, which I thought was a very good one and has bothered me along the way. And I was glad for the discussion and hope that there's further thought about what the criteria are by which we do things. I've assumed, though, that it involves something that wasn't brought up by anybody, which is shared governance. That my memory is that Chapter 36 gives a substantial power to the faculty of the schools with respect to program offerings, not just to the chancellors, although they certainly are very much involved. And I've interpreted it.
I think you're right. Someone would call the question.
I know I passed, but you...
Go ahead, Judy, please.
I just want to say that I think part of the issue, you can't define everything by policy as to what comes to the board table. And one of the things that I expect from good administration is to know when there are issues of enough substance that we ought to be dealing with them. And so I think that there is some flexibility about that, and you would bring it if you thought we needed to know it and sign on.
I know you want to end this, but
I'm just waiting for somebody to move the previous question. All right, Chancellor Shepard.
I'll attempt to be brief, and I do want to directly address Regent Loftus's important point. But before I do, I want to observe that before a governing board in another state about 25 years ago, we brought forward a proposal to eliminate a program, at which point a regent asked us how many students were in the program, 0, how many in the last 5 years, 0, how many in the last 10 years, 0. At which point the regent observed if it takes that long to kill off a dead horse, how long does it take to kill off a live one? As Regent Loftus has pointed out, there are credits that would be acceptable in this degree from the technical college that would not be acceptable in others. I just want to note that this is, in my 35 years in higher education, a standard practice. We all may be thinking of our own experience with BA and BS degrees, but we always have applied baccalaureate degrees. I remember bachelors of agricultural sciences at Oregon State University, an outstanding institution that would accept transfer credits for things like learning how to shoe horses. Now, that would not be accepted if the person changed their major to a BA. These sorts of credits. There are bachelors of social work, bachelors of nursing. We have at least 6 different baccalaureate degrees. Hence the name, a different degree of bachelors of applied studies. Now, the student is admitted to that program and decides they want a BS degree in business. We're going to unpack those 60 credits and look and see what counts and what doesn't, just as we would with any one of our other applied degrees. Finally, I would also note, just so that this is important the Regents understand, we've made these distinctions for a very long time in tech transfer arrangements, in our articulation agreements, program to program. We will accept credits that will work for a business major from a certain institution that wouldn't be generally accepted in the university.
Thank you. I thought I heard a motion. Move the previous question. Is there a second? Second. It's non-debatable. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? On the main motion, pass 1.1.B1.
I'll move.
No, we don't. No, we're voting. We're voting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I need a motion on 1.1.B2.
I move it.
We have a motion.
Second.
There's a second. Discussion. Tom.
Well, this conversation certainly flows from the last one. In a general sense, what we're being asked to do here is continue a trend that's of long standing, and that is a certain segment of the medical professions seeks either through licensing or upping the educational credits or adding costs or adding time to in essence limit entry. And we have before us here making a 2-year program, what is now a 2-year program, a 3-year program. We weren't asked to eliminate the 2-year program and replace it with a 3-year program. This is all mixed in together. This adds a year to these students. It adds $9,000 in tuition for the in-state students. It adds $24,000 a year for the out-of-state students. It takes away it will work to take away the doctor, the medical doctor, as the gatekeeper. It will work to allow these doctors to bill directly to third-party insurers, Medicaid and Medicare. It will take us out of sync with the two-year programs around the country. We were not saying all this, even though I'm going to vote for it, because we have no choice. But we were not presented with the medical rationale for changing this from a two-year to a three-year course. We didn't have a faculty member that teaches in this area come to us and say, the field has changed so much that we need this much extra. The rationale is that we have to do this to stay even with our peers. And it is incredible to think that by limiting entry that you're going to meet increased demand. It just doesn't make, it just doesn't add up. In the Howard program, I guess I didn't understand completely. We have some type of a relationship with Howard University in this program. And listening between the lines, it seemed to say that this would throw us out of sync with that program.
No, I want you to go ahead.
Well, okay. So I hope that when the next one of these comes, and we'll have to vote for it, I suppose, that we ask more. In other words, we should have had someone from the medical faculty here to say to us, there's a need for this. We should have been presented with the proposal in a way that we're eliminating a master's degree program and replacing it with a three-year program. Everyone wants to be a doctor. I understand that. Pretty soon, like go to a hotel lobby in Rome, Dottore, Dottore.
Just a second.
If there is great concern, I mean, can we delay it a month and have... No.
Well, no, we can do anything we want now. Let's. Who did you want to ask a question, or did you?
He answered it. He said no.
Who said no? Okay, well, that's consider the source.
I don't know whether this is semantics or not. But the presenter actually is a physician, so and she's.
Danae,
am I correct?
Danae, Chancellor would like to answer.
I know that, but
I'm asking to get an answer. Go ahead, John.
Well, first of all, I agree with almost every single thing Regent Loftus said. He's absolutely right. It's a matter of principle. There are a few subtleties, though, that I think are really important to get on the table. First, with regard to this escalation of titling of health professions, the allied health professions. That horse is so far out of the barn, there's just nothing effective we can do about it anymore. The profession has decided that for professional practice, henceforth, and I believe it's in this case starting in 2011 or something like that, 2010, to practice professionally as a physical therapist, you must hold a Doctor of Physical Therapy degree. The profession, in effect, usurped our authority, your authority, to name our products. Because, make no mistake about it, this is a master's degree that's called Doctor of Physical Therapy. It's a naming issue more than anything else. It's a master's degrees have a great deal of variability. Some you can get in 1 year in some fields, others take 3 or 4 years in other fields. This is now, instead of a 2-year master's, a 3-year master's, which is renamed Doctor of Physical Therapy. It's as simple as that. We can keep a Master of Physical Therapy on the books for those few students who want to study physical therapy but not practice as a physical therapist. For example, someone who wants to get a physical therapy specialization and then go into an MD program or something. There are odd cases like that. It costs us nothing to carry that on the books because the same faculty, the same courses are involved. But you're absolutely right. This escalation is, I think, outrageous. In fact, someone help me, 10, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, pharmacy did this. Now to practice as a pharmacist, you have to have a doctor of pharmacy. At that time, the Regents had a lengthy debate. Our pharmacy school had a lengthy debate. They did not want to do it. They thought it was not justified, but they were forced to do it by the profession.
Government means.
It lengthened the pharmacy program by 1 year, and to their credit, or in their defense, I'll say that the pharmacists, the American Pharmaceutical Association, did argue that the field had changed, that you have to know more now to practice competently as a pharmacist than you used to, that pharmacists are getting more responsibility handed to them by doctors, doctors are relying on them more, and so on. Now, that sounds good in theory. As far as I can tell, the pharmacist I deal with at Walgreens uses all this added expertise by making me wait until so he or she can show up before I take my medicine. And then says, do you have any questions? So I'm not sure that the reality has panned out the way the theory was supposed to be. This is one of the reasons we believe it's important to combine a medical school, or rename the medical school, Medicine and Public Health, and to begin to train doctors and pharmacists and nurses to make this handoff more effectively, because it could result in reduced health care costs if it worked the way it's supposed to. If it doesn't, if it continues working the way it is, it will only drive health care costs up. Because you're right, it's making it harder to get into the profession, more expensive to get the credential, and commanding higher salaries. Pharmacists get much higher salaries now than they did before the DFARM. And I'm not sure yet that society has realized that added benefit. So I can promise you that on this campus, we're going to work hard in the School of Medicine and Public Health and in all of our allied professions to make sure that the handoff in Wisconsin is effective, that doctors spend less of their time doing things that physical therapists or pharmacists, now trained to a higher level, can do. And there's been a bit of turf battle, to be honest. I mean, what do they call it? The high-level nurses. Nurse practitioners can write prescriptions now. That was a big battle with the doctors. Others will probably eventually also be allowed to write prescriptions or approve prescriptions. Let me just take one more second and say that you really have to, and we don't do a good job of explaining to you when programs are brought forward, some distinctions that are really important and some reasons why not all changes in program carry incremental costs. Over the next week, we're going to grant something like 600, 650 PhDs. Each one of them is unique. The one important requirement for a Doctor of Philosophy degree is that you've made a unique contribution to human knowledge. You've answered a question that no one knew the answer to before. You've done research in an area that was previously unresearched, or at least not to this level. You've put yourself at the very frontier of knowledge in your field. Each one of them could be named differently. In my department of electrical and computer engineering, I can promise you someone who gets a PhD in electrical engineering in solid-state electronics couldn't even pass the beginning level test on motors and generators. They're so different, they're like two different fields. Chemistry, organic chemistry, physical chemistry, analytical chemistry, biochemistry are different enough that students at the PhD level just don't know anything useful about the others' specializations. So we could, instead of offering a PhD in chemistry, we could offer 5 PhDs in chemistry, or as many different PhDs in chemistry as there are graduates. It wouldn't change anything except the packaging and naming, not the cost. This is why I've argued before in front of this board or previous boards that Milwaukee should be allowed to name its PhD programs whatever they want to. They shouldn't always have to say Urban X in front of their PhDs. Nobody else in the world understands those degrees. It's a marketing issue. You can't attract top faculty to the philosophy department if a degree in philosophy, PhD in philosophy from Milwaukee is called a PhD in urban studies. And it doesn't cost them anymore if they change that. So there are, in the case of DFARM, that's not going to, we wouldn't save anything if we eliminated the masters. We can keep it on our books, and if an occasional student wants one, fine. They can pick it up along the way at no extra cost. So there are these packaging, marketing, naming issues that don't really carry cost implications. The same is true, Regent Solis, of departmental questions. It's not always true, it's seldom true, that there's a one-to-one correlation between a degree and a department. For many years, I chaired the material science program, which is a graduate-only master's and PhD in material science. We had no department of material science. It was a committee degree made up of faculty from many different departments. So there was no department there. Many of our degrees have no associated department. Similarly, we have departments, and I'll use a current example as one, comparative literature. There's more comparative literature done in the departments of English, German, French and Italian, Spanish, and so on, than in the Department of Comparative Literature. We don't need an organized department of comparative literature to offer students the opportunity to do comparative literature and study comparative literature. And so
this is bringing up issues that I was deferring because they're not on the agenda. And putting me in a situation for me having to respond to them and taking the time of the board on when there's a motion on the floor.
Okay,
Mr. President, I hope that you would note that.
Yes, I've noted it, but I also note that you care about the timetable of the Board of Regents.
I'll withdraw my comment about conflict.
We'll strike that testimony. Regent Davis.
No.
Okay. We have a motion in front of us. Any further discussion? Regent Rosenzweig.
Yeah, just one point, and I want to go back to something on the motion, and that is something that Regent Loftus raised, and it is difficult when you're assessing the program to factor it in. But the total cost of health care is really influenced by this move. And as the Chancellor said, the train has left the station. But the fact is, if you can directly bill Medicaid and Medicare for the services, in the aggregate, it has the potential for elevating healthcare costs. And I guess those are things that I don't know how you handle in the discussion of whether you accept a new program or not, or how you handle it, but it is a fact, I think. And people would talk about that escalation of the degrees in order to accomplish that particularly, in their mind, worthy goal.
Okay, we have a motion in front of us. The chair would take the opportunity to point out that the legal profession is much more intelligent than these other professions, because in 1970 they threw out the LLB, and without any further going to school, they handed out JDs because the government paid more for JDs. So we got away with it all.
As they would.
As they would. Okay, we have before us 1.1.B2. Are we ready to vote? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Now, we have we have a request for clarification from the President of the University System, Kevin Ryan.
Yeah, and I think this does bear more discussion. I just want to clarify my position on program array, because I think I wasn't being understood. I think what I'm saying is this: in situations where you have a dead horse, to use Chancellor Shepard's metaphor, I don't think it makes sense to require that for every dead horse we want to recognize as a dead horse, we bring it before this board for dead horse approval. I don't think if you've got a horse that has 3 legs and is limping along on its way to the glue factory, and nobody is going to care very much, nobody's going to care very much if it's put into the glue factory, we should have to bring that before you for approval. Now, I do think in the case like ILR, Regent Salas, where there are people who are saying, oh, this is a vital part of our program mix, it fills a niche that other programs don't, people are making that case. We have mechanisms in those situations for those kinds of programs to come forward, indeed as that one did. That will depend on whether some people can persuade enough of you to say we need to consider this at the board level, and that's what happened in that instance. But I think to say in a blanket way, we need as a system-wide board to approve or disapprove every time a program or a department is eliminated or reorganized doesn't make any sense in the terms of the work you need to do. But that's maybe a longer-term discussion. I think if we have Tom Ingram from the Association of Governing Boards come in July, which we hope to do, might be good to have that discussion with him about what current practice is.
And that is the President's opinion. That is not a ruling of the chair or a vote of the board.
That's right.
So if we move on, please, to the fifth? Yes. No, you're not done, I know. I'm sorry. Okay.
Just one more thing on the Education Committee before we leave, and this is deals with the discussion we have that did not appear in the motion, and it relates to the President's the future, the growth agenda and beyond. When we went through the discussion about the Blue Cross, the money coming from the Blue Cross Shuffle and what we do with it, you could take health indicators in this state, and you could see that we're not doing very well in many health indicators. And you could take your charts of the other day of where we are in our academic standing, BAs, IPOs per CPI per GNP, whatever it was, and you can see that either other states have gone quite a bit ahead of us, or we have fallen quite a bit behind from where we have been, and it's not just in your indicator; it is another. And we're the worst state in the country on infant mortality rates for black Wisconsinites. Our rate is twice that of Minnesota. And you can go through those health indicators and take the surrounding states and see that there is something different here. And we had a long discussion with the Chancellor from Parkside. And, you know, when you look at the Fiscal Bureau papers, it shows Parkside graduation rate at 28%. I mean, you can get it up to 38% with adding students from Parkside that go to other campuses in the system. But as the Chancellor pointed out, that's not the true graduation rate, and this comes back to your point. I think we would like to know our true graduation rate. And part of the discussion, I think, also raised more questions that if the goal were to increase BAs, there might be other places to put the resources to meet that goal than what we saw in the presentation.
All right, thank you. We'll move on now to the report of the Business, Finance, and Audit Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Business and Finance and Audit Committee met in joint session with the Education Committee in room 1820 at the beginning of our meeting to hear the third annual report of the Wisconsin Partnership Fund for a Healthy Future, something which Regent Loftus has recently reduced to the Blue Cross Shuffle and what we do with it. We actually heard, I think, what was I think all agreed was a most interesting presentation by Dr. Robert Golden, the Dean of the UW School of Medicine and Public Health, and the Vice Chancellor for Medical Affairs at UW-Madison. This was the third annual report of the Wisconsin Partnership Fund for a Healthy Future. Dr. Golden reported that the Oversight and Advisory Committee, which is called OAK, has allocated 35% of the funding for public health initiatives. They reviewed 81 proposals from community organizations throughout Wisconsin. 26 grants were awarded for a total of $6.8 million for community academic partnerships, community population health initiatives, and community-based public health education and training initiatives. Awards are aligned with state health plan priorities. The second component of this partnership fund is called the Medical Education and Research Committee, or MERC. 65% of the funding out of the resources go to strategic medical education and research initiatives. Within MERC, 11 new awards were made, totaling $9.4 million. The Institute for Clinical and Translational Research received a $7 million grant with the hope to leverage this into a $65 million grant from the National Institute of Health. Total awards since 2004 total $50 million, representing 129 grants. Dean Golden, I think, all agreed, and both the members of the Education Committee and Business and Finance all agreed. I think demonstrated a remarkable understanding of the complicated and difficult health needs we face as an entire state of Wisconsin, and in particular in southeastern Wisconsin. He provided insights into the priorities for 2007 and beyond that I think all agreed seemed right on target in terms of the important issues facing this state, including reducing health disparities in birth outcomes, collaborations between the OAK and Merck, a comprehensive evaluation of the Wisconsin Partnership Program, a vision for the transformation into the School of Medicine and Public Health, and a 5-year plan that is under development. He stressed the importance of collaboration and partnership, and there was a wide-ranging discussion. Some members of the Education Committee sought to stay there for several hours beyond the appointed time, continuing that discussion, and a resolution will be presented at the end of my report as a consent resolution related to the Wisconsin Partnership. At that point, the committee reconvened in Van Nuys 1418. I think we probably had more than enough discussion, Mr. President, about committee meeting rooms and their relative benefits. The Business and Finance Committee stands ready to meet wherever you send us, now or in the future.
You're speaking for the whole committee here.
At least speak for myself. Our committee is in some, may have a different view. Although we did feel that Van Nuys 1418 was a vivid testament to deferred maintenance needs of Wisconsin system. But meeting there, we first heard from Associate Vice President Al Christ, who reported on the titles and number of new hires designated as limited appointments within the UW system. These are at-will positions, and some, mostly those hired from an existing UW system faculty or staff position, retain concurrent appointment rights. This information will be included in a report to be submitted by June 1st to the Legislative Audit Committee, as required by the Legislative Audit Bureau's audit of UW system personnel practices and policies. We then moved to a consideration of a salary adjustment for a senior academic leader. President Riley asked the committee to approve a salary increase for the provost at UW-Milwaukee based on external market and competitive factors. That resolution will also be presented at the end of my report as consent resolution. I'm now going to turn this over to Regent Conley Kiesler, whose first item is going to be a discussion of the audit on textbook costs in higher education. And I just, if I might, wanted to make just one comment or request to the board, if you have not already done so, and you probably already have. I guess if you are concerned about affordability and access to higher education, I would urge you to read closely the audit on textbook costs. I think this is a very interesting and in-depth analysis of what has happened in textbook costs over the last decade or two in higher education. The pharmaceutical industry has met the publishing business in terms of the many of the same issues that come through, and the costs of textbooks is an extraordinarily important issue, I think, for students and for families and for their parents, and there are some fairly serious implications in terms of access as it relates to financial aid decisions and the calculation of the cost of textbooks and the calculation of the amount of financial aid provided to students. And I guess I would just encourage all of our colleagues, if you haven't already done so, to read that audit.
And I would agree with you. It really is one of the best audits we've had, and it's very interesting and not dry at all. So, Julie Gordon, Director of Office of Operations Review and Audit, stated that the office looked at institutional and legislative efforts to control textbooks. There are comparable cost savings to students at institutions with a textbook rental program. The committee engaged a good discussion with campus representatives about the challenges in establishing the textbook rental program. The report recommended that each UW institution, particularly those without the textbook rental program, involve faculty, students, bookstore managers, and others with relevant experience in reviewing the institution's practices for selecting and selling textbooks to identify approaches to control textbooks costs. The Business and Finance and Audit Committee unanimously approved Resolution 12E Prin 1, a copy which is in your packets. On behalf of the committee, I move adoption of Resolution 12E Prin 1.
Second. We have, second, Mr. President.
All in favor? Aye. Oh, yeah, discussion?
You're gonna allow that.
Vice Chair?
Thank you. Should I keep going? No,
I wanted to just, and I agree with you, Regent Floyd, and it's wonderful work of Regent Connie Kieser that you've done. But I wanted to look at the resolution and how it responds to the recommendations of the audit itself, because I think there might be some incongruity. And I'm looking at approaches for controlling cost. There's a number, and that's what's this page number? That is
just I or 1-1, but we took the recommendations off page 14 and 16.
But did you include they recommend a consortium for buying back textbooks that I don't see in the resolution. Did you consider that?
We had a lot of discussion about purchasing textbooks that way, and all kinds of discussion came up. It's tough for faculty to organize from campus to campus. They don't all agree on the same type of textbook that should be used.
So you didn't adopt, you didn't
no, we
agree
did not.
with the recommendation?
Well, we're asking everybody to go back and look, and you'll see in the resolution, we want those campuses to all come back to us by the December meeting, with looking at all the recommendations and all the possibilities in the discussion. What are they going to do?
Secondly, you do refer to, the audit does refer to that in the UW system there are model rental programs, but it doesn't identify the campuses. Were you privy to that information? Can you communicate to the rest of the board who those campuses are, so that we want additional information from them? We can go to those campuses directly.
Clapton, River Falls.
I think the report does do that.
It does, although Regents House, I think it's...
Point.
Yeah, there are a number that do it, and I think we were blessed by both the presence of both Chancellor Betts and Chancellor Marquis, who talked about Platteville and River Falls experience in terms of clearly the success of this textbook rental, the popularity of the textbook rental program on the campus, the fact that parents consistently identified as one of the top 2 or 3, I think Chancellor Betts identified it as one of the top 2 or 3 things that they most value about the experience. And in regards to the consortium, as Regent Conley-Kiesler indicated, that is certainly one of the issues that's on the table in terms of reporting back. I mean, that when those programs that have textbook rental, those campuses that have textbook rental programs, in all likelihood, don't need to worry about consortiums and other kinds of things. Those campuses that don't, we would hope, might look at that as one of the issues that they would consider in their report back to the board in December.
And thank you, Regent Floyd. And I know, of course, on the Stevens Point project, and I recently I viewed the River Falls project, and I wanted to know the response from the students on those projects. I wanted to share that information with the rest of the board.
Thank you.
Those are my only comments.
Thank you. You want to continue with your report?
I do. Legislative Audit Bureau information. We can vote.
The resolution.
We voted.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, official.
Thank you, Gloria.
Director Gordon reported that the LAB's report on information technology IT projects primarily focused on large projects at 28 state agencies. The audit suggests that the legislature consider requiring regular reports on major IT projects. Here's a recommendation for the board oversight of major information technology projects. Ms. Gordon asked the committee to approve a resolution directing that the committee receive an annual report of major IT projects. The committee would receive supplementary reports anytime total expenditures are expected to exceed the total annual budget of the Common Systems Review Group. The resolution endorses recommendations of the LAB in its recent review of IT projects and directs that the reports directly to the board or the Business, Finance, and Audit Committee be provided to legislative leaders to help them stay informed of significant IT activity in the UW system. This resolution will be presented at the end of the report. We had a follow-up to the computer data. You remember, it was probably 2 years ago, we had an audit done on how are we disposing of used computers and how we're getting that data off there, because there certainly was a lot of issues nationwide about that. So we did do an audit. We did give recommendations to the campuses. Director Gordon gave a follow-up report which found that the UW institutions have largely implemented the office's reviews, recommendations related to developing written policies and procedures for surplus computer disposal and implementing adequate data removal procedures when recycling or selling computers. Quarterly status report, Director Gordon discussed the status of major projects currently underway, including computer security, student mental health services, oversight of student organizations, tuition waivers, and academic fees. And that was it for audit.
Thank you. We then move to a consideration of student lending in the UW system, business practices, and code of conduct. Executive Senior Vice President Don Nash, with representatives of UW institutions, led a discussion about current business practices related to student lending in the UW system. Campus financial aid directors provided insights into student loan practices throughout the UW system. This is a very complicated issue. I think the committee appreciated that. It is, I think, has been reported at various points. I mean, in part, this is an issue that has arisen because the federal government walked away from an ongoing, continued commitment to the student loan program and essentially froze funds for all intents and purposes in that federally funded program, and thereby ushered in a whole array of private lenders. And it is complicated. And I think the committee felt very strongly that Executive Senior Vice President Don Nash is leading a strong and very important initiative here in taking a look at developing a code of conduct that will provide and reassure students and their families that we are looking out for their best interests, and that, in a sense, we are committed to a program that is open, transparent, and that will be in ultimately the best interest of the students of the UW system. And the committee approved a resolution directing the establishment of a UW system code of conduct for student loan activity, which will build upon existing state ethics rules as well as the recommendations of the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. This resolution will also be presented at the end of my report as a consent resolution. We then heard from Sherry Ackley, the director of the UW System Office of Safety and Loss Prevention, on an overview of risk management in the UW system. She outlined risks and exposures throughout the UW system and noted that we have the lower injury rates than any other state agencies, and property loss claims are about the same or slightly lower than those in the rest of the state. Director Ackley provided a number of interesting statistics on trend data for workers' compensation, property, and liability programs. Vice President Debbie Durkin reported that quarterly gifts, grants, and awards totaled almost $865 million for the 9-month period, actually not the quarter, the 9-month period ending March 31st, 2007. This represents an increase of almost $46 million over the same period last year. Vice President Durkin stated also that reported on the tuition and financial aid working group that President Riley told the board about yesterday. As well, that group will be asked to address 5 major topics: institutional and program differential tuition, tuition stratification within the UW system, per credit tuition versus plateau tuition, the use of tuition revenue to support financial aid, and establishing competitive non-resident tuition levels. Ms. Durkin reported also, gave us an update on an audit being conducted by the Internal Revenue Service, made everyone feel quite comfortable right off the bat. She reported that the IRS has been conducting an employment tax audit since the fall of 2005, focusing on the 2003 and 2004 tax years. The UW system has responded to about 80 informational data requests, and it is expected that they will soon be providing us with their official findings. Finally, Vice President Durkin gave us an update on the Minnesota Reciprocity Agreement, an issue of, I know, considerable interest for the whole board. She stated that negotiations regarding Minnesota reciprocity are ongoing, and the hope is that there will be an agreement reached by the end of May. UW system continues also on the good news side to be projecting a surplus in our utility appropriation, which we intend to husband those resources to pay the fine to the Internal Revenue Service. The Business, Finance, and Audit Committee unanimously approved the following resolutions, which I now present as consent items. On behalf of the Business, Finance, and Audit Committee, I move the adoption of Resolution 1.2.A, the Wisconsin Partnership Fund for a Healthy Future Annual Report. Resolution 1.2.D, consideration of salary adjustment for a senior academic leader to address recruitment and retention challenges for the provost at UW-Milwaukee. Resolution 1.2.E, parent 3, recommendations for board oversight of major information technology projects. And Resolution 1.2.F, parent 1, financial aid practices, guidelines, and code of conduct.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any request to remove any item from the consent agenda?
I don't think I'm requesting to remove one, but I guess I'd ask for your help on it. 2F1, obviously the company I'm with engages with students, and I don't think I have to abstain because I support this. And I don't know if it has to be removed, but I think that has to be out there.
I think it should be removed, and then you should abstain. Is that what you're saying?
I was thinking not abstaining, because I certainly support code of conduct, but just that it's disclosed.
All right. I don't think you know. We won't remove it. Seeing no requests, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. We have any additional resolutions? Are there any communications, petitions, memorials? Yes, sir. Regional Office.
I had the great good fortune and honor and privilege to go to be with the governor earlier this week in Boston to present at the International Biotech meeting where the state of Wisconsin had an exhibition and a program over 4 days, and I think it should be no surprise that really the university system was the star of the show. A couple of things. The governor gave his remarks and talked about the covenant and talked about the cooperation of the university system in the biotech industry. He did a very good job. I talked about the university and the wonderful system that we have and the willingness for partnerships for businesses in this area. And then they thought it would be good for me to have the job to introduce Professor Yoshihiro Kawaoka, and to say that 8 times during my introduction. He is the world's really renowned and renowned expert and practitioner in discovering the strains of bird flu, other things. He was the star of the show for the state. So it was a good event, and the university system was prominently displayed as the centerpiece for Wisconsin. And on Sunday night, I did go to a UW-Madison alumni event. 400 rowdy people. A program, an open bar. Cinco de Mayo. It was just wonderful. There are 5,000 alumni in Boston of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. It is an extremely active chapter, and it's by far not the largest one. So it was a great experience.
That's great. The board will recall last year we had a special closed session for that professor to do what we thought was best. Are there any other communications or memorials? Any unfinished business? Any new business? Call on Regent Bradley.
I move that the Board of Regents move into closed session to consider a UW Superior honorary degree nomination and to consider naming a UW Stevens Point facility after a person as permitted by Section 1985 1F